Hello and welcome to another Bible story adventure. I'm thrilled to share these Bible stories with you today. Each one holds valuable lessons for our lives. Let's dive right in. Now we move to a man who did not want to obey God's instructions. His name was Jonah, and his adventure with a huge fish will show us why we should always listen to God. There lived a man named Jonah. He was a prophet. Jonah lived in Israel, in a town called Gath-Hepher. He knew God well. He had spoken God's words to people many times before. Sometimes the messages were happy. Sometimes they were warnings. But Jonah always delivered them. He was faithful. He was obedient. Or so everyone thought. One day, something happened that changed everything. Jonah was sitting in his house. The sun was setting. Golden light poured through his window. He was eating his evening meal. Bread and fish and olives. Simple food. Good food. He was thinking about nothing in particular. His mind was quiet and calm. Then God spoke to him. The voice came like thunder in his mind. It shook his thoughts. It filled every corner of his being. This was not unusual for Jonah. God had spoken to him before, many times. But what God said next made Jonah's heart stop. "Get up," God said. "Go to the great city of Nineveh. Walk through its streets. Cry out against it. Tell the people their wickedness has come up before me. I have seen all their evil deeds." Jonah froze. His bread fell from his hand. It hit the table with a soft thud. His mouth went dry. His heart began to pound. "Nineveh? Of all the cities in the world, God wants me to go to Nineveh?" he said. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria. The Assyrians were the enemies of Israel. They were brutal warriors. They conquered nations. They destroyed cities. They took people as slaves. They showed no mercy. They worshipped false gods. They mocked the true God of Israel. The Assyrians had hurt Jonah's people. They had killed his friends. They had burned villages. They had caused so much pain and suffering. Jonah hated them. Every good Israelite hated them. This hatred was deep. It was old. It was passed down from generation to generation. And now God wanted Jonah to warn them. God wanted to give them a chance to repent. God wanted to show them mercy. Jonah could not believe it. He would not believe it. These people did not deserve mercy. They deserved punishment. They deserved destruction. If God was going to destroy them, wonderful. Let it happen. Why warn them? Why give them time to change? Jonah sat there in the fading light. His mind raced. His heart burned with anger. Not anger at the Assyrians this time. Anger at God. How could God ask this of him? How could God care about those monsters? Those killers? Those enemies of everything good and holy? No, Jonah would not do it. He could not do it. But how do you say no to God? How do you refuse the creator of the universe? Jonah knew he could not simply refuse. God would not accept that. So Jonah decided to do something else. He decided to run. That very night, Jonah packed a small bag. He took some food, some water, a change of clothes. He did not tell anyone where he was going. Not his family, not his friends, no one. He slipped out of his house like a thief in the darkness. He walked through the quiet streets of his town. Dogs barked in the distance. The stars shone overhead, cold and bright and uncaring. Jonah pulled his cloak tight around him. He walked fast. His feet moved with purpose. He had a plan. Nineveh was to the east, across the desert, so Jonah would go west, as far west as possible. He would go to the sea. He would find a ship. He would sail to the furthest place he knew, a place called Tarshish. No one knew exactly where Tarshish was. It was at the edge of the known world. Some said it was in Spain. Others said it was even further. It did not matter to Jonah. What mattered was this. It was in the opposite direction from Nineveh. It was as far from God's command as he could get. Jonah walked for days. He followed the road west, through hills and valleys, past olive groves and vineyards. He did not stop to rest much. He was driven by fear and anger and stubbornness. His feet hurt. His legs ached. But he kept going. Finally, he reached the coast. The great Mediterranean Sea spread before him, blue and vast and endless. Ships bobbed in the harbor. Sailors shouted to each other. Merchants argued over prices. The smell of salt and fish filled the air. Jonah went to the docks. He asked around, "Is anyone sailing to Tarshish?" Most sailors laughed. "Tarshish? That is very far, friend. A long and dangerous journey." But Jonah kept asking. Finally, he found a captain who was preparing to sail. The ship was large. Its sail was patched but strong. The crew looked experienced, weathered men with sun-darkened skin and hard eyes. "I need passage to Tarshish," Jonah said. The captain looked him up and down. "You have money?" Jonah nodded. He had brought money with him. Money he had saved. Money for emergencies. This felt like an emergency. "Show me," the captain said. Jonah opened his purse. He poured coins into the captain's hand. It was a lot of money, more than the passage should cost. But Jonah did not care. He just wanted to get away, to run, to escape. The captain's eyes widened. He closed his fist around the coins. "Very well. We leave at dawn. Be here on time, or we leave without you." Jonah spent the night at a small inn near the harbor. He barely slept. His mind was troubled. Part of him knew he was doing wrong. Part of him knew you cannot run from God. But the stubborn part of him, the angry part, pushed those thoughts away. Dawn came gray and cold. Jonah went to the ship. The crew was already loading the last supplies: barrels of water, sacks of grain, ropes and tools. Everything needed for a long voyage. Jonah climbed aboard. The ship rocked gently beneath his feet. The wood creaked. The smell of tar and old fish was strong. He found a spot below deck, a dark corner where he could be alone, where he could hide. The crew cast off. The ship moved away from the dock, slowly at first, then faster as the wind caught the sail. Jonah felt the ship rise and fall on the waves. He closed his eyes. He was exhausted. The long walk, the sleepless night, the weight of his decision. It all pressed down on him. He fell asleep. Above him, the sailors worked. They adjusted the sail. They tied down cargo. They sang work songs. The sea was calm. The wind was good. The captain smiled. This would be a profitable voyage. For a day and a night, the ship sailed smoothly. The weather was perfect. Too perfect, some of the older sailors muttered. But they kept working. Then, on the second day, everything changed. The sky grew dark, not the darkness of night. This was different. The clouds came from nowhere, thick and black and angry. They rolled across the sky like smoke. The wind picked up, suddenly, violently. The sails snapped and cracked. The ship lurched. The sailors scrambled. They had seen storms before. They knew what to do. They tied things down. They prepared for rough weather. But this storm was not normal. The wind howled. It screamed. It came from all directions at once. The waves grew huge. Mountains of water rose up. The ship climbed up one side, hung at the top for a terrible moment, then crashed down the other side. Water poured over the deck. The ship groaned. The wood bent and creaked. The sailors shouted. They grabbed ropes. They pulled at the sail. They tried to turn the ship. Nothing worked. The storm was too strong, too wild, too angry. These were experienced men. They had sailed through many storms. They had faced danger before, but they had never seen anything like this. This storm had come from nowhere. It had come so fast. And it was so powerful, unnaturally powerful. Fear gripped their hearts. "The gods are angry," one sailor shouted. "Someone has offended them," another cried. In ancient times, sailors believed the gods controlled the sea. When storms came, they thought the gods were punishing someone. The sailors looked at each other. Who among them had angered the gods? What had they done wrong? The captain shouted orders. "Lighten the ship. Throw the cargo overboard." The sailors obeyed. They grabbed the heavy cargo, the grain, the oil, the goods they were taking to Tarshish to sell. All of it. They threw it into the raging sea, barrel after barrel, sack after sack, their livelihood, their profit, all gone. But they did not care. They only wanted to survive. The ship rose a little higher in the water, but the storm did not stop. It grew worse. The waves grew taller. The wind grew stronger. The ship began to crack. Water leaked through the boards. The sailors knew they were going to die. They fell to their knees. Each man cried out to his own god. Some prayed to Baal, some to Dagon, some to Astarte, some to gods whose names are now forgotten. They begged, they pleaded, they made promises. But the storm raged on. The captain suddenly remembered something. There was one passenger, the man who had paid so much money. Where was he? The captain stumbled across the pitching deck. He held tight to the railing. Waves crashed over him. He went down the stairs below deck. The water was ankle deep here. In the darkness, he found Jonah. Jonah was still sleeping. How could anyone sleep through this? The ship was being torn apart. The storm was deafening. Men were screaming. But Jonah slept deeply, completely, like a dead man. The captain grabbed Jonah. He shook him hard. "Wake up, wake up. How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe your God will notice us. Maybe he will save us from death." Jonah woke slowly, confused, disoriented. Water sloshed around his feet. The ship tilted violently. He could hear the storm now. The screaming wind, the crashing waves, the terrified sailors. He stumbled up onto the deck. The sight that met him was terrifying. The sky was black as midnight. The waves were like walls. The ship was being tossed like a toy. The sailors were white with fear. Jonah's heart sank. He knew. Somehow he knew. This storm was not natural. This storm was from God. God had sent it. God was pursuing him. You cannot run from God. Jonah had known this all along. But now he was seeing the proof. God had found him. Even here, even in the middle of the vast ocean. The sailors were talking frantically, shouting over the wind. "Someone among us has done something wrong. The gods are punishing us for someone's sin. We must find out who it is." In those days, people used lots to make decisions. They believed the gods controlled the lots. The lots would reveal the truth. The captain shouted, "Come, let us cast lots. Let us find out who is responsible for this disaster." The sailors agreed. They found some stones. They marked them. They prepared to cast the lots. Each man gathered around. Even in the storm, even with death so close, they needed to know who had brought this upon them. They cast the lots. The lots fell. The sailors looked down. Even in the spray and the darkness, they could see. The lot pointed to Jonah. All eyes turned to him. The sailors surrounded him. Their faces were hard, angry, afraid. "What have you done?" the captain demanded. "Who are you? Where do you come from? What is your country? What is your people?" The questions came like arrows. Jonah stood there. Water dripped from his beard. The wind tore at his clothes. He looked at these frightened men. these pagan sailors who served false gods, and he felt ashamed. He had brought this upon them. His disobedience, his running, his sin. These innocent men were about to die because of him. Jonah raised his voice above the storm. I am a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven. He made the sea and the dry land. The sailors stared at him. The God of heaven? The one who made the sea? If this man's God made the sea, then this storm made sense. This was no ordinary God. This was the God above all gods. What have you done? They asked again. Their voices shook. Jonah had already told them he was running away from God. He had mentioned it when he first came aboard. But they had not understood. Now they understood. Why have you done this? They cried. Terror filled their faces. The storm grew worse. The ship was breaking apart. There was no time for long explanations. Jonah looked at them. These men did not deserve to die. He had to save them. There was only one way. Pick me up, Jonah said. His voice was steady now, calm. Throw me into the sea. Then the sea will become calm for you. I know it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. The sailors stepped back. Throw him overboard? Kill a man? They could not do that. Even pagans had some sense of justice, some sense of mercy. No, the captain said. We will row harder. We will reach land. The sailors grabbed the oars. They rowed with all their strength. Their muscles burned. Their hands bled. They pulled and pulled. But it was useless. The storm was too strong. The waves pushed them back. The wind drove them in circles. The ship was sinking. They were all going to die. Finally, the sailors realized there was no other way. Jonah had to go into the sea. It was the only chance they had. But first they prayed. Even though they were pagans, even though they served false gods, they prayed to the true God, to Jonah's God, the God who made the sea. "O Lord," they cried out, "please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us guilty of killing an innocent man. You are the Lord. You do what you want." It was a good prayer, an honest prayer. Even though they did not know God well, they knew this much. You do not kill a man lightly. You do not take a life without consequences. But they had no choice. They grabbed Jonah. He did not fight them. He stood still, ready, accepting. This was his punishment. This was what he deserved. The sailors lifted him up. 1, 2, 3. They threw him over the side. Jonah fell through the air. For a moment he was flying. Then he hit the water. The sea was cold. So cold it took his breath away. The water closed over his head. Down he went, down into the depths. The waves pushed him under. He could not breathe. He could not see. There was only darkness and cold and pressure. Above him, on the ship, something amazing happened. The instant Jonah hit the water, the storm stopped. The wind died. The waves flattened. The dark clouds broke apart. Sunlight poured through. The sea became calm, perfectly calm, like glass. The sailors stood frozen. Water dripped from their bodies. They looked around in wonder. The storm was gone, completely gone, as if it had never been. The only evidence was the damage to their ship, the missing cargo, their exhausted bodies. They fell to their knees, right there on the wet deck. They worshipped the Lord, Jonah's God, the God of heaven, the God who made the sea. Truly, he is God, they said. Truly, he has power over everything. They made vows to him. They promised to serve him. They offered sacrifices. These pagan sailors, who had never known the true God, now believed. They had seen his power. They had felt his presence. They would never be the same. But what about Jonah? Down in the deep, Jonah was drowning. His lungs burned. His limbs grew weak. The weight of the water pressed on him. He sank deeper and deeper. He could see light above him, growing fainter. This was the end. He was going to die. But God was not finished with Jonah. God had prepared something. Before the foundation of the world, perhaps. Or maybe in that very moment, God had prepared a great fish. Not a whale, though many people call it that. The ancient words just say a great fish. A huge creature of the deep, something big enough to swallow a man whole. The fish came through the dark water, silent, swift. Its mouth opened wide, wider than a door, wider than a gate. Jonah saw it coming. Or maybe he did not. Maybe it was too dark. Maybe his eyes were already closed. The fish swallowed him. One moment Jonah was drowning. The next moment he was inside the fish. He slid down its throat. He landed in its belly. He was covered in slime, in stomach fluids. The smell was beyond description. Rotting fish, bile, death. But he could breathe. Somehow, impossibly, there was air. Not much, not good air, but enough. Enough to keep him alive. Jonah lay there in the darkness, in the belly of the fish. He could not see anything. It was darker than any night, darker than any cave. He could feel the movement of the fish swimming, the muscles contracting and relaxing. He could hear the gurgling, the strange sounds of the creature's body. He was alive, but barely, and he was trapped, inside a fish, in the depths of the sea. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah was in the belly of that fish. 3 days, 3 nights. Time lost all meaning in that darkness. Jonah could not tell day from night. He could not tell up from down. He only knew the darkness, the smell, the fear. At first he was in shock. His mind could not accept what had happened. This could not be real. It had to be a dream, a nightmare, but it was real. The pain was real. The fear was real. The darkness was real. Then, slowly, Jonah began to think, to remember, to understand. He had run from God. He had disobeyed. He had been selfish and angry and stubborn. And what had it brought him? Disaster, death almost. And now this, trapped, imprisoned in the most horrible way possible. Jonah began to pray. Not the kind of prayer you pray in a temple, not formal words, not beautiful phrases. This was raw prayer, desperate prayer, prayer from the very depths of his soul. Lord, he cried out in the darkness. I called to you in my distress. You answered me. From deep in the grave I called for help. You heard my voice. He remembered being thrown into the sea, the water closing over him, the terror of drowning. You threw me into the deep, into the heart of the seas. The currents swirled around me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I thought I was banished from your sight. I thought I would never see your holy temple again. His voice echoed in the belly of the fish, strange and hollow. But he kept praying. The water surrounded me. It threatened my life. The deep closed around me. Seaweed wrapped around my head. I sank down to the roots of the mountains. The earth with its bars closed around me forever. Jonah wept as he prayed, tears mixed with the slime on his face. He had been so close to death, closer than he had ever been. He had felt his life slipping away. But you brought me up from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fading away, I remembered you, Lord. My prayer rose up to you, to your holy temple. And then Jonah said something important, something he needed to say, something he needed to confess. Those who worship false gods abandon your faithful love. But I will sacrifice to you with songs of praise. I will fulfill all my vows. Salvation comes from the Lord. There it was, the truth. Jonah had been running from God's love, from God's mercy. He had not wanted God to show mercy to Nineveh. He had wanted them destroyed. He had been worshiping his own anger, his own hatred, instead of following God. But salvation comes from the Lord, not from our feelings, not from our desires, not from our plans, from the Lord alone. Jonah's prayer was finished. He lay there in the darkness, exhausted, empty. But somehow, for the first time since God had called him to Nineveh, he felt peace. He had surrendered. He had given up running. He did not know what would happen next. He might die here in this fish. But at least he had made peace with God. At least he had confessed. At least he had prayed. Then something happened. The fish moved differently. It was swimming up toward the surface, up toward the light. Jonah felt the change. He felt hope rise in his chest. The fish broke the surface of the water. Jonah could feel it, could sense the light, though he could not see it. The fish swam. It swam toward land. Jonah did not know how he knew, but he knew. The fish reached the shore, shallow water, sand, beach. Then the fish vomited. It opened its great mouth. Its stomach contracted. And Jonah came flying out. He landed on the sand, wet, covered in slime, gasping. His skin was bleached white from the stomach acids. His hair was falling out. He looked like a ghost, but he was alive. The sun was bright. So bright after 3 days of darkness. Jonah could barely open his eyes. He lay there on the beach. The waves lapped at his feet. Seabirds called overhead. The sand was warm beneath him. Jonah wept. He wept with relief, with gratitude, with wonder. God had saved him. God had not abandoned him, even after everything, even after his disobedience, even after his running. God had saved him. For a long time, Jonah just lay there, getting his strength back, letting the sun warm his cold body. Slowly, he got to his feet. He washed in the sea. He cleaned the slime from his skin and hair. He found fresh water to drink. He found food. And he waited. The word of the Lord came to him a second time. The same voice, the same power. But now Jonah was ready to listen. "Get up," God said. "Go to the great city of Nineveh. Proclaim the message I give you." This time, Jonah did not argue. He did not run. He got up, and he went. The journey to Nineveh was long. Many days of walking, through desert and hills, past villages and towns. Jonah walked with purpose now. His feet were sure. His heart was set. As he walked, people stared at him. His skin was still bleached white. His appearance was strange. Some people whispered. Some pointed. Some ran away. Jonah looked like a man who had died and come back to life. In a way, he had. Finally, after many days, Jonah saw Nineveh in the distance. It was huge. Nineveh was one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. Its walls were massive, tall and thick. They stretched for miles. Towers rose at intervals. Gates opened to roads leading in all directions. Inside those walls lived thousands upon thousands of people. It would take 3 days just to walk through the whole city. That is how big it was. Streets and markets and houses and palaces, all crowded together. Busy, noisy, full of life. Jonah entered the city through one of the great gates. The guards looked at him strangely but let him pass. He walked into the streets of Nineveh. The city was everything he remembered, everything he hated. The people were Assyrians, the enemies of his people. They spoke a different language. They wore different clothes. They worshipped different gods. Their temples stood everywhere. Idols lined the streets. But Jonah had a job to do. He had a message to deliver. So he walked through the streets, and he began to cry out. 40 days, he shouted. In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed. People stopped. They turned to look at this strange man with the white skin and the powerful voice. 40 days. Jonah cried again, Nineveh will be overthrown. He walked down one street, then another, then another. Everywhere he went, he shouted the same message. Simple, direct, terrifying. 40 days until destruction. The people of Nineveh listened. At first, some laughed, some mocked. Who was this crazy man? What right did he have to threaten their city? But something about Jonah made them pause. His appearance, his voice, the certainty in his words. This was not an ordinary prophet. This was not an ordinary message. The word spread through the city, fast, like fire. People told their neighbors. Neighbors told their friends. Soon everyone was talking about the strange prophet and his message of doom. 40 days until Nineveh is destroyed. And then something remarkable happened. Something unexpected. Something that Jonah himself probably did not expect. The people believed God. Not just a few people. Not just the poor or the desperate. All of them, rich and poor, young and old, merchants and soldiers, mothers and children. They heard the message, and they believed it. Fear gripped the city. But not just fear. Something else. Conviction. Guilt. The people of Nineveh knew they were wicked. They knew they had done terrible things. They had killed. They had stolen. They had worshipped false gods. They had oppressed the weak. They had lived for themselves with no thought of what was right or wrong. Now judgment was coming. In 40 days, God would destroy them all. But maybe, just maybe, there was hope. The people began to fast. They stopped eating. They stopped drinking. They put on sackcloth. Sackcloth is rough cloth made from goat hair. It is uncomfortable, itchy. People wore it to show they were sorry, to show they were mourning. Everyone in Nineveh put on sackcloth. Everyone fasted, from the greatest to the least. This repentance swept through the city like a flood. Even the king heard about Jonah's message. Even the king believed. He got up from his throne. He took off his royal robes. He put on sackcloth. He sat in ashes. Ashes are a sign of deep sorrow, deep repentance. Then the king made a decree. He sent messengers throughout the city. They read his proclamation in every street, in every market, at every gate. By the decree of the king and his nobles, they read, no person or animal, no herd or flock, may eat or drink anything. Every person and every animal must be covered with sackcloth. Everyone must call urgently on God. Everyone must give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent. He may have compassion. He may turn from his fierce anger. Then we will not perish. The king's words showed true humility, true repentance. He did not make excuses. He did not blame others. He did not try to negotiate with God. He simply acknowledged their sin. He asked for mercy. And he admitted he did not know if God would spare them. Who knows, he said. That is faith. That is humility. The entire city repented. Every person, every family, even the animals wore sackcloth. It must have been an amazing sight. This great, powerful, wicked city humbled. Everyone in ashes and rough cloth. Everyone praying. Everyone fasting. God saw their repentance. He saw that they turned from their evil ways. He saw their genuine sorrow, their genuine change, and God had compassion on them. He decided not to destroy Nineveh. The judgment was called off. The city was spared. This should have been a moment of joy, a moment of celebration. God's mercy had triumphed. Thousands of people were saved. A whole city was given another chance. But Jonah was not happy. When Jonah saw that God spared Nineveh, he became angry, very angry. This was what he had feared all along. This was why he had run in the first place. He had known God would do this. He had known God would show mercy to these people. And Jonah did not want them to have mercy. He wanted them destroyed. Jonah prayed to the Lord, but it was not a prayer of thanksgiving. It was a prayer of complaint, of anger. "Lord," he said, "is this not what I said would happen when I was still at home? This is why I ran away to Tarshish. I knew you are a gracious and compassionate God. You are slow to anger. You are filled with love. You are quick to relent from sending disaster. I knew you would forgive them." There it was. The truth. Jonah's real problem was not with Nineveh. It was with God. He could not accept God's mercy. He could not accept God's love for people he hated. "Now, Lord," Jonah continued, "take away my life. I would rather die than live." It was a dramatic statement, a petulant statement, like a child throwing a tantrum. Jonah was so upset that God had shown mercy that he wanted to die. But God did not get angry with Jonah. God asked him a simple question. "Is it right for you to be angry?" Jonah did not answer. He just walked away. He left the city. He went to a place east of Nineveh. He sat down there. He made himself a little shelter from branches and leaves. And he waited. He wanted to see what would happen to the city. Maybe God would still destroy it. Maybe the judgment was just delayed. The sun beat down on Jonah. It was hot, very hot. The desert heat was brutal. Jonah sat in his little shelter, sweating, uncomfortable, still angry. Then God did something kind. God provided a plant. It grew up overnight, a large plant with broad leaves. It grew over Jonah's shelter. It gave him shade, cool, blessed shade. The plant blocked the sun. It made Jonah comfortable. Jonah was very happy about the plant. Finally, something good, something pleasant. He sat in the shade and felt grateful for the relief. But the next morning, at dawn, God provided a worm. The worm attacked the plant. It chewed through the stem. The plant withered and died. By the time the sun rose, the plant was gone. Dead, dried up. The sun rose. It beat down on Jonah's head. God sent a scorching east wind, the kind of wind that feels like fire. The combination of the sun and the wind made Jonah faint. He felt weak, dizzy, sick. Again, Jonah wanted to die. "It would be better for me to die than to live," he said. Again, God asked him a question. "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" This time Jonah answered, "I am angry enough to die." Jonah was serious. The plant was gone. The shade was gone. He was hot and uncomfortable. And yes, he was angry, very angry. Then God spoke, and God's words went to the heart of everything, the heart of the whole story, the heart of what God wanted Jonah to understand. "You cared about this plant," God said, "but you did not make it grow. You did not tend it. It sprang up in a night. It died in a night. You did nothing for it, yet you cared when it died." God paused. Let the words sink in. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people, people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, people who do not know me. And there are also many animals. Should I not care about that great city? There it was. The truth. The lesson. The point of everything. Jonah had cared about a plant, a simple plant, something that gave him temporary comfort. He mourned when it died. He was angry about it. But he did not care about 120,000 people, men and women and children, people made in God's image, people who did not know God, people who were lost. Jonah wanted them destroyed. He had no compassion for them at all. And God was asking him, "Do you not see the problem here? Do you not see how wrong your heart is?" God loved those people in Nineveh. Yes, they were wicked. Yes, they had done terrible things. Yes, they were enemies of Israel. But they were still people. They were still God's creation. And when they repented, when they turned from their evil ways, God had mercy on them. That is who God is. Gracious, compassionate, slow to anger, filled with love, quick to forgive. And that is the end of the story. We do not know what happened to Jonah after that. Did he finally understand? Did his heart change? Did he accept God's mercy? The book does not tell us. Maybe that is on purpose. Maybe the story ends there so we can ask ourselves the same questions. Do we care more about our own comfort than about people who need God's mercy? Do we want God to judge people we do not like? Do we struggle to accept God's forgiveness of others? Do we think some people do not deserve a second chance? The story of Jonah is not really about a fish. It is about God's heart, God's love, God's mercy, and it is about our hearts too. Do we share God's compassion? Or are we like Jonah, angry when God shows mercy to people we think do not deserve it? These are the questions the story asks us. These are the lessons we must learn. God's love is bigger than our hatred. God's mercy is greater than our judgment. And God cares about all people, even the ones we think are enemies. Now, let's continue with the mind-boggling story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This is the story of a place that crossed every line and paid the ultimate price in one night of divine justice. But to see the full picture, we have to rewind all the way to Abraham and Lot. Abraham was a wanderer who lived in tents and moved across the dusty lands with his flocks. He was very rich. He owned thousands of sheep and goats and cattle. He had many servants who helped him care for his animals. Silver and gold filled his tents. But more important than all his wealth, Abraham knew God. He walked with God and talked with God like a friend talks with a friend. Abraham had a wife named Sarah. She was beautiful and wise. Together they had traveled far from their homeland. God had called Abraham to leave his father's house and go to a new land. God made wonderful promises to Abraham. He promised that Abraham's descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. He promised that all nations would be blessed through Abraham's family. These were amazing promises, especially since Abraham and Sarah had no children yet. Traveling with Abraham was his nephew Lot. This young man was the son of Abraham's brother, who had died. Abraham had taken Lot under his care. Lot grew up following his uncle across the wilderness. He learned from Abraham. He saw how Abraham trusted God. Lot also became wealthy. He too had flocks and herds and servants. For many years, the two families traveled together. They moved from place to place, looking for grass for their animals and water for their flocks. They set up their tents near wells and streams. They lived as nomads, never staying in one place too long. But as time passed, a problem grew. Both Abraham and Lot had so many animals that the land could not support them all in one place. The grass was not enough. The water was not enough. There was not enough room for both families together. The shepherds who worked for Abraham began to quarrel with the shepherds who worked for Lot. They argued about who could use which pasture. They fought about who could water their flocks at which well. The arguments grew louder and more frequent. The peace between the two camps was breaking down. Abraham heard about these quarrels. It troubled him deeply. He was a man of peace. He did not want fighting in his family. He especially did not want his servants fighting with Lot's servants. Abraham decided he must do something before the situation grew worse. One morning, Abraham called Lot to meet with him. They walked together to a high place where they could see far in every direction. The land stretched out before them under the bright sky. Hills rolled away to the horizon, valleys cut between the ridges. Rivers sparkled in the distance. Abraham spoke with kindness and wisdom. "My nephew, let there be no strife between you and me, or between your shepherds and my shepherds. After all, we are family. We are brothers. The whole land lies before us. Let us separate. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. You choose first. Take whichever direction you prefer." This was a generous offer. Abraham was the elder. He was the uncle. By all rights, he should have chosen first. But Abraham gave Lot the first choice. He was willing to take whatever was left over. This showed the greatness of Abraham's character. Lot looked around carefully. His eyes scanned the landscape in all directions. To the north were rocky hills. To the west were dry plains. To the south was more wilderness. But to the east, something caught Lot's attention. His gaze fixed on what he saw there. In the east lay the valley of the Jordan River. This valley was like a green ribbon cutting through the brown landscape. Water flowed abundantly there. Trees grew thick along the riverbanks. Grass covered the valley floor. It was lush and beautiful and well-watered everywhere. The whole valley looked like a garden. It reminded people of Eden itself, the paradise garden where God had placed the first man and woman. But there was something else in that valley that attracted Lot's attention. There were cities there. Great cities with high walls and impressive buildings. The largest were called Sodom and Gomorrah. These cities were famous throughout the region. They were centers of trade and commerce. Merchants came from distant lands to do business there. The cities were wealthy and powerful. They seemed to offer opportunity and prosperity. Lot made his choice quickly. "I will take the Jordan Valley," he said. "I will move my tents toward those cities in the east." Abraham agreed without complaint. He accepted the land that remained. He would take the hill country, the less impressive territory. He trusted that God would bless him wherever he went. So the two men parted ways. Lot gathered all his possessions. He rounded up his flocks and herds. He called his servants together. They packed everything and began the journey east toward the Jordan Valley. They traveled down from the hills into that lush green valley. Abraham watched them go. Then he turned in the opposite direction. He moved his tents to the land of Canaan, to the hill country. There he settled with his flocks. After Lot left, God spoke to Abraham. "Lift up your eyes," God said. "Look from where you are standing. Look to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth. If anyone could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." So Abraham moved his tents. He came and lived near the great trees of Mamre, which are at Hebron. There he built an altar to the Lord. Meanwhile, Lot settled in the Jordan Valley. At first, he pitched his tents near the city of Sodom. He lived on the outskirts, close enough to benefit from the city but not quite inside it. His flocks grazed on the rich grass of the valley. His herds drank from the abundant streams. Everything seemed perfect. But there was something Lot did not fully realize. There was a darkness in those cities. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah were exceedingly wicked. Their sin against the Lord was very grave. They had no respect for what was right and good. They had no fear of God. They had no concern for justice or mercy. The people of Sodom were proud and arrogant. They had plenty of food and lived in comfort, but they did not help the poor and needy. They were cruel to strangers. They were violent toward anyone who was weak or vulnerable. They practiced terrible sins that twisted what God had made good. They celebrated evil and mocked righteousness. The same wickedness filled Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain. The whole region had become corrupt. Sin was like a poison that had seeped into everything. Young people learned evil from the older generation. Children grew up thinking that wickedness was normal. No one taught them right from wrong. The entire culture had turned away from God. Yet Lot stayed there. Perhaps he thought he could remain separate from their evil. Perhaps he thought the business opportunities were too good to pass up. Perhaps he simply enjoyed the comfort and convenience of city life. Whatever his reasons, Lot did not leave. Gradually, he moved closer to the city. Eventually, he moved right inside the walls of Sodom itself. Lot became a resident of Sodom. He bought a house there. He sat in the city gate where the elders and important men gathered to make decisions. He became part of the community. His daughters grew up in that city. They absorbed its culture. Lot arranged for them to marry young men from Sodom. But living in Sodom troubled Lot's soul. Deep inside, he knew the people around him were doing wrong. He saw their wickedness every day. He heard their evil talk. He witnessed their cruelty. It tormented his righteous soul to live among them and see and hear their lawless deeds. But still, he stayed. Years passed. Abraham lived in the hill country, faithful to God. Lot lived in Sodom, trying to maintain his integrity in a corrupt place. The wickedness of the cities continued to grow. The evil there became worse and worse. Up in heaven, God saw everything. Nothing escapes his notice. No sin is hidden from his eyes. God watched the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah. He heard the cries of those who suffered because of the violence and cruelty in those cities. The sin of these places was like a loud cry reaching up to heaven itself. God is patient and merciful. He does not want anyone to perish. He gives people time to change their ways and turn from evil. But the people of Sodom and Gomorrah did not change. They only became more wicked. They had no desire to do what was right. They loved their sin and refused to give it up. Finally, God decided that judgment must come. These cities must be destroyed. The time for mercy had passed. Justice demanded action. God would go down and confirm what he already knew. Then he would bring judgment on these evil cities. One day, something extraordinary happened. It was a hot afternoon, the kind of day when everything is still and quiet in the heat. Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent under the shade of the great trees of Mamre. The sun beat down. There was no breeze. Everything shimmered in the heat. Abraham looked up, and suddenly he saw 3 men standing near him. They appeared without warning, as if out of nowhere. Abraham did not know at first who they were, but he knew immediately that he must show them hospitality. In that culture and that time, hospitality was sacred. A stranger in the desert needed help. There was no hotel to stay in, no restaurant to buy food. Travelers depended on the kindness of others. A good man always welcomed strangers and provided for their needs. Abraham jumped up from where he was sitting. Despite the heat, despite his old age, he ran to meet the visitors. He bowed low before them with his face nearly touching the ground. This was a sign of deep respect. "My lords," Abraham said, "if I have found favor in your eyes, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought. Wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed. Then you may go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of the finest flour and knead it, and bake some bread." A seah was a large measure, so this was a generous amount of bread. Then Abraham ran out to the herd. He selected a choice, tender calf, one of the best animals. He gave it to a servant, who hurried to prepare it. The servant butchered the calf and cooked it over a fire. Abraham brought curds and milk. He brought the meat that had been prepared. He set all this food before the visitors. Then he stood near them under the tree while they ate. Abraham served them himself, showing great respect. While they were eating, one of the visitors asked, "Where is your wife Sarah?" "There, in the tent," Abraham replied. Then the visitor said something that shocked Abraham. "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind the visitor. Abraham and Sarah were already very old. Sarah was past the age of childbearing. Her body could no longer have children. It had been many years since that was possible. So Sarah laughed to herself. She thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" The idea seemed ridiculous to her, impossible. She laughed at the very thought. But then the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, "Will I really have a child now that I am old?" Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was frightened because she realized this was no ordinary visitor. She came out and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." Then Abraham understood. This was the Lord himself, appearing in human form. God had come to visit him. The other two were angels of the Lord. Abraham stood in the presence of God Almighty. When the men finished eating, they got up to leave. They looked down toward Sodom, which lay far below in the valley. Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way, as a good host should do. Then the Lord began thinking out loud, as if talking to himself. "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him, for I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. So the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord spoke directly to Abraham. He told him what was about to happen. "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The two angels turned away and headed toward Sodom. But Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham's heart filled with alarm. His nephew Lot lived in Sodom. Lot's wife and daughters lived there. If God destroyed the city, they would all die. Abraham gathered his courage. He stepped closer to the Lord. What he was about to do was bold, almost presumptuous. He was going to question God's plan. He was going to argue with the Almighty. But Abraham's heart was moved with compassion, both for his nephew and for any righteous people who might live in the city. "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" Abraham asked. His voice was respectful but urgent. "What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it?" Abraham continued, his voice growing stronger. "Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right?" These were remarkable words. Abraham was appealing to God's own character. He was reminding God, if God needed reminding, that God is just. God is righteous. God always does what is right. Surely God would not destroy innocent people along with the guilty. The Lord answered, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Abraham felt a flicker of hope, but he also knew that 50 righteous people in Sodom might be too many to find. So he pressed on, negotiating with God. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord," Abraham said humbly, "though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5 people? If I find 45 there," the Lord said, "I will not destroy it." Abraham spoke again. "What if only 40 are found there?" The Lord answered, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." Then Abraham said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there?" The Lord answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham continued, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 are found there?" The Lord said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." Finally Abraham said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 are found there?" The Lord answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." This was as far as Abraham dared to go. He had bargained God down from 50 to 10. Surely there must be at least 10 righteous people in a whole city. Surely Lot and his family would make at least 10. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left. Abraham turned and walked back to his tent. His heart was troubled. He had done what he could. He had prayed. He had pleaded. Now he could only wait and trust in God's justice and mercy. Evening came. The two angels arrived at Sodom. They appeared as men, travelers coming to the city as the sun was setting. Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. This was the place where the men of the city gathered. It was where business was conducted and judgments were made. Lot had become an important man in Sodom. When Lot saw the two strangers, he got up to meet them. He bowed down with his face to the ground, just as Abraham had done. Lot too believed in showing hospitality to strangers. "My lords," Lot said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning." But the angels said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." They were testing Lot. They wanted to see how insistent he would be. They also wanted to see what would happen if strangers stayed in the city square overnight. But Lot pressed them strongly. He urged them repeatedly, "Please, my lords, you must come to my house." Lot knew his city. He knew what happened to strangers in Sodom after dark. He knew they would not be safe in the square. Finally, the angels agreed. They went with him to his house. Lot prepared a meal for them. He baked bread without yeast because there was no time for bread to rise. He set food before them, and they ate. Lot's house was probably a nice one. He had lived in Sodom for years now. He had become prosperous. He owned property in the city. His family was settled there. His daughters had grown up as citizens of Sodom. They were engaged to marry young men from the city. But before the angels went to bed that night, something horrible happened. It revealed just how wicked Sodom really was. It showed why God's judgment must fall. Men from every part of the city came to Lot's house. Young men and old men gathered there. The Bible says all the people from every quarter came. This means the whole male population of Sodom surrounded Lot's house. This was not just a few troublemakers. This was the entire city. They called out to Lot in loud, aggressive voices. "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." Their intentions were evil and violent. They wanted to rape Lot's guests. This showed the depth of Sodom's wickedness. Even strangers, who should have been protected according to all ancient customs, were not safe. The most basic laws of hospitality meant nothing in this city. Cruelty and lust had completely taken over. Lot was horrified. He went outside to speak to the mob. He shut the door behind him so the visitors would be safe inside. Lot tried to reason with the crowd. "No, my friends," Lot said. "Don't do this wicked thing." Then Lot did something that seems shocking to us. He made a terrible offer. "Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." This offer was awful. How could Lot offer his own daughters to a violent mob? It shows how confused Lot had become from living in this evil city for so long. He was trying to follow the code of hospitality, which said that a host must protect his guests at all costs. But his judgment had become twisted. His priorities had become warped. Living in Sodom had damaged his moral compass. The mob rejected his offer anyway. They were not interested in his daughters. They shouted back at Lot angrily. "Get out of our way," they yelled. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They pressed hard against Lot. They pushed forward, trying to shove him aside. They were about to break down the door. The situation was turning violent. Lot was in danger. The visitors inside were in danger. But suddenly, the two angels acted. They reached out from inside the house. They grabbed Lot and pulled him back inside quickly. They slammed the door shut. Then they struck all the men outside with blindness. This was not ordinary blindness. The Hebrew word suggests a blinding flash, a supernatural striking of their eyes. Every single man standing outside, from the youngest to the oldest, was suddenly unable to see. They groped around in confusion. They felt along the walls, trying to find the door. They stumbled into each other. But they could not find the entrance to Lot's house, no matter how hard they tried. They wore themselves out searching. Inside the house, the angels spoke urgently to Lot. Now they revealed why they had come. Now the terrible truth came out. "Do you have anyone else here?" the angels asked. "Sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you. Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place." The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. Lot's heart must have stopped. Destroy the city? His whole world was about to end. Everything he had built here would be gone. He had to warn his family immediately. Lot rushed out into the night. He ran through the dark streets to the houses where his daughter's fiancés lived. These young men were engaged to marry Lot's 2 daughters. They were about to become part of Lot's family. Lot burst in on them, gasping for breath. "Hurry," he shouted. "Get out of this place. The Lord is about to destroy the city." But the young men thought he was joking. They laughed at him. They did not believe him for a second. "Old Lot has lost his mind," they probably said to each other. "Destroy the city? What nonsense." Their reaction showed several things. First, it showed that they had no fear of God. The idea that God might judge them seemed ridiculous. Second, it showed that Lot had lost his credibility. He had lived among them for so long, compromising and going along with their culture, that they did not take him seriously when he finally spoke up. His witness had been destroyed by his choices. Lot returned home with a heavy heart. His future sons-in-law would not listen. They refused to leave. They would die in the coming judgment. The night dragged on slowly. As dawn approached, the angels became more urgent. They shook Lot awake if he had dozed off. They pressed him to hurry. "Get up," they commanded. "Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." But Lot hesitated. Even now, knowing what was coming, he could not make himself leave. He lingered. He delayed. He looked around at his house, his possessions, his life. This was his home. This was where he had lived for years. How could he just walk away? The angels saw him hesitating. They knew he would never leave on his own. So because the Lord was merciful to Lot, the angels took action. They grabbed Lot by the hand. They grabbed his wife by the hand. They grabbed each of his 2 daughters by the hand. Physically, they pulled the family along. They dragged them out of the house. They led them through the streets of Sodom. They brought them safely outside the city walls. As soon as they were outside, one of the angels spoke with fierce urgency. Every word was a command. "Flee for your lives. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." The instructions were clear. Run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Go to the mountains where you will be safe. Don't delay even for a moment. Your lives depend on your obedience. But Lot was still afraid. "Even now," he argued. "No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." Lot was afraid of the mountains. Perhaps he thought they were too far away. Perhaps he thought wild animals lived there. Perhaps he simply wanted to stay in a town, any town, because that was what he was used to. He had become a city person. He could not imagine living in the wilderness. So he begged to go to a small town instead. There was a little city nearby, much smaller than Sodom. Lot pointed to it. "Let me go there instead," he pleaded. The angel agreed, showing mercy even in this moment. "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of. But flee there quickly. because I cannot do anything until you reach it." That is why that town was called Zor. The name means small or little. Lot had called it a little place, and so it was named. Lot and his family began to run. They ran across the plain as fast as they could. The sun was rising. Light was spreading across the sky. It was early morning. The day was beginning. In Sodom and Gomorrah and the other cities of the plain, people were waking up. They were starting their normal routines. They had no idea that this was their last morning on earth. By the time Lot reached Zor, the sun had risen completely over the land. It was full daylight now. Lot and his daughters stumbled into the small town, gasping for breath. They had made it. They were safe. And then it began. From heaven above, the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. Fire and burning sulfur fell from the sky like rain. It was a supernatural judgment. God Himself was destroying these cities. The fire fell everywhere. It covered the cities completely. Buildings burst into flames. The heat was incredible. People ran screaming through the streets, but there was no escape. The fire was everywhere. The sulfur burned everything it touched. Thus the Lord overthrew those cities and the entire plain. He destroyed all those living in the cities. He destroyed everything that grew on the land. The judgment was total and complete. Nothing survived. But as Lot and his daughters were running, something terrible happened. Lot's wife disobeyed the angel's command. She looked back. She turned around to see what was happening to the city behind them. Why did she look back? Was she thinking about her home? Was she worried about her friends who still lived there? Was she thinking about her possessions, her comfortable life, everything she was leaving behind? Did she simply have to see the destruction with her own eyes? We don't know why she looked back. But she did. And when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt. Right there, in that moment, she was turned into a statue of salt. She stood frozen, looking back toward the burning cities. Her body became a monument to the danger of loving the world too much. Lot and his 2 daughters reached Zor safely. They survived the destruction. But Lot had lost his wife. His sons-in-law were dead. His home was destroyed. His wealth was gone. Everything he had worked for over all those years was reduced to ashes. Early the next morning, Abraham got up. He went to the place where he had stood before the Lord and pleaded for the cities. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, down toward all the land of the plain. What Abraham saw filled him with horror and grief. Dense smoke was rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. The whole valley was burning. Thick black clouds rose into the sky. The beautiful green valley was gone. The great cities were destroyed. Where there had been life and activity, now there was only death and destruction. Abraham did not know yet whether Lot had survived. He must have feared the worst. His heart was heavy as he watched the smoke rising. He had prayed for those cities. He had pleaded with God to spare them. But there had not been even 10 righteous people there, so judgment had fallen. But God had remembered Abraham. Because of Abraham's prayer, because of Abraham's relationship with God, God had rescued Lot. He had brought Lot out of the catastrophe. He had saved Abraham's nephew from the destruction. Lot was afraid to stay in Zor. Even though it was a small town that had been spared, Lot did not feel safe there. Perhaps he feared that judgment might still come. Perhaps he could not bear to live in another city after what he had experienced. So Lot and his 2 daughters left Zor and went up into the mountains that the angels had originally told them to go to. They found a cave and lived there. Lot had gone from being a prosperous city dweller with a nice house to being a cave dweller in the mountains. He had lost everything. His poor choices had led to disaster. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was complete and final. Where the cities had stood, there was now only devastation. The land became barren. Nothing would grow there anymore. The area became what we now call the Dead Sea, a body of water so salty that nothing can live in it. The region around it is still today a harsh, desolate place. The smoke that rose from those burning cities could probably be seen for many miles around. People throughout the region would have witnessed it. News of the destruction spread far and wide. Everyone heard about what God had done to Sodom and Gomorrah. The story became famous throughout the ancient world. For thousands of years afterward, people would speak of Sodom and Gomorrah as examples of God's judgment. Prophets would warn cities and nations, "Do not be like Sodom and Gomorrah, or you will face the same fate." The cities were gone, but the lessons remained. The story taught that God sees all wickedness. Nothing is hidden from him. He is patient and gives people time to repent. But his patience has limits. When a society becomes completely corrupt, when evil fills every corner, judgment must come. The story also showed God's mercy. He sent angels to warn Lot. He listened to Abraham's prayer. He was willing to spare the cities if even 10 righteous people could be found there. He physically pulled Lot's family to safety when they hesitated. Even in judgment, God's mercy was present, reaching out to save those who would accept it. Abraham's bold prayer showed that God welcomes honest conversation with his people. God did not strike Abraham down for questioning him. Instead, God patiently answered each question. This shows that we can approach God with our concerns, our questions, even our arguments. God is not threatened by our prayers. He wants us to care about justice and mercy as he does. Lot's story was a warning. He had chosen to live in Sodom because it looked prosperous and comfortable. But he had not considered the spiritual condition of the people there. Slowly, imperceptibly, living among evil people had changed him. He had lost his witness. His family had become attached to the culture of Sodom. When judgment came, even his own sons-in-law did not believe him. His wife could not let go of the old life. Lot's choice to live in Sodom cost him dearly. The men of Sodom who surrounded Lot's house showed how completely evil had taken over the city. It was not just a few bad people. The whole male population came out. Young and old, rich and poor, all of them participated. The entire social structure had collapsed. There was no shame left, no sense of right and wrong, no respect for basic human decency. Lot's wife, looking back, showed the danger of a divided heart. You cannot follow God while loving the world. You cannot escape judgment while longing for what you are leaving behind. She was saved from Sodom physically, but her heart remained there, and it cost her everything. The pillar of salt that had been Lot's wife stood as a monument for years, perhaps for generations. People passing by would see it and remember. Remember what happened to Sodom. Remember what happens when you look back. Remember the cost of loving the world too much. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah has echoed through history. Jesus spoke about these cities. He said that some towns that rejected him would face a judgment worse than Sodom's. The apostles wrote about Sodom and Gomorrah as examples and warnings. The story has been told and retold for thousands of years. Even today, we can visit the region where Sodom and Gomorrah once stood. The Dead Sea lies there, one of the lowest points on earth. The water is so salty that people float on top of it. Nothing lives in it. The shore is crusted with salt. The land around it is barren and desolate. The very landscape bears witness to what happened there long ago. Sulfur deposits can still be found in that region. When they burn, they produce the same kind of destruction described in the Bible. The geological evidence matches the biblical account. Something catastrophic happened there, something that left permanent scars on the land. But beyond the physical evidence, beyond the historical facts, the story speaks to every generation. It warns us that choices matter. Where we live, who we associate with, what we value, all these things shape who we become. It reminds us that God judges sin, but he always provides salvation for those who turn to him. Now, let's journey to the northern kingdom of Israel and see what happened to Queen Jezebel. History remembers many queens, but only a few leave behind a shadow as dark and unforgettable as Jezebel's. She entered Israel's palace with charm, confidence, and a fierce determination to reshape the nation her way. Kings listened to her, prophets feared her, and the people felt the weight of her influence in every corner of the land. But beneath the beauty and boldness was pride and arrogance that led her to ruin. This is her story. Long ago in Israel, there lived a king named Ahab. He was the seventh king to rule the northern kingdom after the great nation had split in two. Ahab sat on his throne in the beautiful city of Samaria. He ruled over 10 tribes of Israel. His father Omri had been king before him. Now the crown rested on Ahab's head. But Ahab made a choice that would change everything. He decided to marry a foreign princess. Her name was Jezebel. She came from the coastal city of Sidon. Her father was Ethbaal, the king of the Sidonians. These people worshipped false gods. They did not know the one true God of Israel. When Jezebel arrived in Israel, she brought her gods with her. She brought her priests with her. She brought her ways of worship with her. And Ahab loved his new wife so much that he began to follow her gods too. This broke the heart of the Lord God. The people of Israel belonged to him. He had rescued them from slavery in Egypt. He had given them the promised land. He had made them into a mighty nation. He had given them judges and kings. He had protected them from their enemies. And he had asked only one thing in return: worship me alone. Serve no other gods. But Ahab turned away from the Lord. He built a temple for Baal in Samaria. Baal was the storm god that Jezebel's people worshipped. They believed Baal brought the rain. They believed he made the crops grow. They believed he controlled the weather and the seasons. Ahab set up an altar in this temple. He even made an Asherah pole. This was a wooden symbol for another false goddess. The Bible tells us that Ahab did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any king who came before him. He did not just turn away himself. He led the whole nation astray. Soon the people of Israel were bowing down to Baal. They were forgetting the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jezebel was not content to worship her gods quietly. She wanted everyone to follow Baal. She hated the prophets of the Lord. These were holy men who spoke God's words to the people. They warned the nation to turn back to God. They reminded the people of God's laws. They called out sin and wickedness wherever they found it. Jezebel hunted these prophets down. She sent her soldiers after them. She ordered them to be killed. One by one, the prophets of the Lord were murdered. Their voices were silenced. Their blood stained the ground. The land that God had given his people became a place where his messengers were slaughtered. But God always has a remnant. There was a man named Obadiah who served in Ahab's palace. He was a faithful servant of the Lord. When Jezebel began killing the prophets, Obadiah acted. He took 100 prophets and hid them. He put 50 in one cave and 50 in another cave. He brought them bread and water. He kept them safe while Jezebel's soldiers searched the land. Meanwhile, Jezebel brought hundreds of false prophets to Israel. She gathered 450 prophets of Baal. She also brought 400 prophets of Asherah. These men ate at her table. They received royal support. They spread false teachings throughout the land. They told the people that Baal was powerful. They said Baal would bless them if they worshipped him. The nation was falling deeper and deeper into darkness. The people forgot the true God. They forgot his miracles. They forgot how he had parted the Red Sea. They forgot how he had fed their ancestors with manna in the wilderness. They forgot how he had brought down the walls of Jericho. They turned to lifeless idols made of wood and stone. But God was watching. He saw everything that was happening in Israel. He saw Jezebel's wickedness. He saw Ahab's weakness. He saw the people's faithlessness. And he decided to send them a message they could not ignore. There was a prophet named Elijah. He came from the land of Gilead, east of the Jordan River. He wore rough clothing made of hair. He wrapped a leather belt around his waist. He was a wild man who lived in the wilderness. But he spoke the words of God with power and authority. One day Elijah walked straight into King Ahab's palace. He stood before the king and the queen. He looked them in the eyes, and he delivered a message from the Lord God of Israel. As surely as the Lord God lives, the God I serve, there will be no dew or rain in Israel for the next few years. The rain will not fall until I say so. Then Elijah turned and walked out. Ahab and Jezebel stared after him in shock. Who was this strange prophet? How dare he speak to the king this way? How dare he pronounce such a curse on the land? But Elijah's words came true. The months passed. No rain fell. The sky remained clear and blue day after day. The morning dew stopped appearing on the grass. The streams began to dry up. The wells ran low. The crops withered in the fields. The first year passed. Still no rain. The second year came. The drought continued. The people grew desperate. They cried out to Baal. They begged the storm god to send rain. But the sky stayed empty. No clouds formed. No thunder rolled. No lightning flashed. Jezebel's prophets performed their rituals. They chanted their prayers. They made their offerings. But Baal did not answer. The land grew drier and drier. Famine spread through Israel. Animals died. People went hungry. The nation suffered terribly. During this time, Elijah hid from Ahab and Jezebel. God sent him to a brook called Cherith. He drank water from the brook. Ravens brought him bread and meat each morning and evening. When the brook dried up, God sent him to stay with a widow in the town of Zarephath. This town was actually in Sidon, Jezebel's homeland. There Elijah performed miracles. He multiplied the widow's flour and oil. When her son died, Elijah prayed and God brought the boy back to life. 3 years passed, 3 long years without rain. The drought was so severe that Ahab himself went out searching for water. He wanted to find enough grass to keep his horses and mules alive. He split up the search with Obadiah. Each man took a different direction across the land. While Obadiah was traveling, he ran into Elijah. The prophet had come out of hiding. He told Obadiah to go tell Ahab that Elijah wanted to meet him. Obadiah was terrified. Ahab had been searching everywhere for Elijah. The king had sent men to every nation looking for the prophet. If Obadiah told Ahab where Elijah was, and then Elijah disappeared again, Ahab would kill Obadiah. But Elijah promised he would stay, so Obadiah went to Ahab and told him the news. When Ahab heard that Elijah wanted to meet, he rushed to see the prophet. The king confronted Elijah. "Is that you troubler of Israel?" But Elijah did not back down. He pointed his finger at the king. "I have not troubled Israel. You have. You and your family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands. You have followed the Baals." Then Elijah issued a challenge. "Send messengers through all Israel. Gather all the people at Mount Carmel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal. Bring the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." Ahab agreed. He sent word throughout the nation. Soon a great crowd gathered on Mount Carmel. All Israel came to watch. The prophets of Baal came. The prophets of Asherah came. Even Ahab came to see what would happen. Elijah stood before the people. He was one man facing hundreds of false prophets. He looked at the crowd of Israelites. "How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people said nothing. They just stared at him in silence. Elijah continued, "I am the only prophet of the Lord left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Bring 2 bulls. Let the prophets of Baal choose one. Let them cut it into pieces and lay it on wood, but let them not light the fire. I will prepare the other bull. I will lay it on wood but not light the fire. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire is the true God." All the people agreed. "What you say is good." The prophets of Baal went first. They prepared their bull. They laid it on the wood. Then they began to call on Baal. Baal, answer us. They shouted from morning until noon. They danced around the altar. They leaped and jumped, but nothing happened. No voice answered. No fire fell. At noon, Elijah began to mock them. Shout louder. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought. Or maybe he is busy. Or perhaps he is traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. The prophets of Baal shouted louder. They slashed themselves with swords and spears. This was their custom. Blood poured from their bodies. They went into a frenzy. They prophesied and ranted. The afternoon passed. Evening approached. Still nothing happened. There was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah called to the people, "Come here to me." They gathered around him. He repaired an old altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. He built an altar in the name of the Lord. He dug a trench around it. He arranged the wood. He cut the bull into pieces and laid them on the wood. Then he did something strange. "Fill 4 large jars with water," he said. "Pour it on the offering and on the wood." They did so. The water soaked the wood and the meat. "Do it again," Elijah said. They poured more water. "Do it a 3rd time," Elijah commanded. They poured water a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar. It filled the trench completely. Everything was soaked. The wood, the meat, the stones, the ground. It would be impossible to light a fire now. Then Elijah stepped forward. He prayed a simple prayer. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel. Let them know that I am your servant. Let them know I have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me. Let these people know that you, Lord, are God. Let them know you are turning their hearts back again." The moment Elijah finished praying, fire fell from heaven. It was not a small flame. It was not a spark. It was a raging fire that consumed everything. The fire burned up the sacrifice. It burned up the wood. It burned up the stones. It burned up the soil. It even licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell on their faces. They cried out, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Elijah seized the moment, seized the prophets of Baal. Do not let anyone escape. The people grabbed the false prophets. Elijah took them down to the valley below. There, all 450 prophets of Baal were killed. Then Elijah told Ahab to go eat and drink. "There is the sound of heavy rain," he said. While Ahab went to eat, Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel. He bent down to the ground. He put his face between his knees. He told his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant went and looked. He came back. There is nothing there. 7 times Elijah sent him to look. On the 7th time, the servant returned with news. "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." Elijah jumped up. "Go and tell Ahab. Hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose. Heavy rain began to fall. The drought was over. God had sent the rain. Ahab rode in his chariot back to his palace in Jezreel. But the power of the Lord came upon Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to Jezreel. When Ahab reached home, he told Jezebel everything that had happened. He told her about the contest on Mount Carmel. He told her how Elijah's God had sent fire from heaven. He told her that all her prophets of Baal were dead. Jezebel exploded with rage. Her face turned red. Her eyes flashed with fury. How dare this prophet kill her prophets? How dare he humiliate her gods? How dare he challenge her power? She sent a messenger to Elijah with a threat. May the gods deal with me severely if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them." When Elijah received this message, something broke inside him. He had just seen God do an incredible miracle. He had just won a great victory. But now this wicked queen threatened his life. Fear gripped his heart. He got up and ran for his life. He fled south into Judah. He went to Beersheba. He left his servant there and went a day's journey into the wilderness. He sat down under a broom tree. He was exhausted. He was discouraged. He was afraid. He prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. But an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." Elijah looked around. There by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank. Then he lay down again. The angel came back a second time. He touched Elijah again. "Get up and eat. The journey is too much for you." So Elijah got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There God spoke to Elijah. He encouraged the prophet. He told him he was not alone. There were 7,000 people in Israel who had not bowed to Baal. God gave Elijah new assignments. He was to anoint new kings. He was to anoint Elisha as the next prophet. Elijah left the mountain with renewed purpose. But back in Israel, Jezebel continued her wicked ways. Near Ahab's palace in Jezreel, there was a vineyard. It belonged to a man named Naboth. The vineyard was close to the palace. Ahab wanted it for a vegetable garden. One day Ahab approached Naboth. "Let me have your vineyard. It is close to my palace. I want it for a vegetable garden. I will give you a better vineyard in exchange. Or if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." But Naboth refused. "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors." In Israel, land stayed in families. It passed from father to son. It was not to be sold permanently. Naboth was honoring God's law. Ahab went home sullen and angry. He lay on his bed. He turned his face to the wall. He refused to eat. He pouted like a spoiled child. Jezebel came in. "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" Ahab told her about Naboth and the vineyard. He told her Naboth refused to sell. Jezebel looked at her husband with contempt. "Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I will get you the vineyard of Naboth." Jezebel was not bound by Israel's laws. She did not care about God's commands. She did not respect the rights of common people. She would take what she wanted through any means necessary. She wrote letters in Ahab's name. She sealed them with his seal. She sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city. The letters said to proclaim a day of fasting. They said to seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Then they were to seat two scoundrels opposite him. These men were to accuse Naboth of cursing both God and the king. Then they were to take him out and stone him to death. The elders and nobles did exactly as Jezebel instructed. They proclaimed a fast. They seated Naboth prominently. The two scoundrels came and sat opposite him. They brought false charges against Naboth in front of everyone. Naboth has cursed both God and the king. The people took Naboth outside the city. They picked up stones. They threw them at him. Stone after stone struck his body. He fell to the ground. They kept throwing stones until he was dead. An innocent man was murdered because a greedy king wanted his vineyard. And behind it all was the scheming mind of wicked Jezebel. When Jezebel heard that Naboth was dead, she went to Ahab. "Get up and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth, the one he refused to sell you. He is no longer alive. He is dead." Ahab got up. He went down to take possession of Naboth's vineyard. He walked through the rows of grapevines. He planned his vegetable garden. He did not ask how Naboth died. He did not care about justice. He simply took what he wanted. But God saw everything. He sent Elijah to confront Ahab. The prophet found the king in Naboth's vineyard. "So you have found me, my enemy," Ahab said when he saw Elijah. "I have found you," Elijah replied, "because you have sold yourself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord." Then Elijah pronounced God's judgment. "This is what the Lord says. In the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood." "Yes, yours." Elijah had more to say. He turned and spoke about Jezebel. "And concerning Jezebel, the Lord says this: dogs will devour Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel." The words hung in the air. A terrible prophecy. A horrible death predicted for the proud queen. Dogs would eat her body. She would have no proper burial. No honor. No dignity. Just the shameful end she deserved. Elijah continued, "Dogs will eat those belonging to Ahab who die in the city. The birds will feed on those who die in the country." Then the prophet spoke final words of condemnation. There was never anyone like Ahab. He sold himself to do evil in the eyes of the Lord. He was urged on by Jezebel, his wife. He behaved in the vilest manner. He went after idols just like the people the Lord drove out before Israel. When Ahab heard these words, something changed in him. He tore his clothes. He put on sackcloth. He fasted. He lay in sackcloth. He went around meekly. For once in his life, he showed genuine remorse. God saw Ahab's humility. He spoke to Elijah again. "Have you noticed how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself, I will not bring this disaster in his day. But I will bring it on his family in the days of his son." Time passed. Ahab eventually died in battle, just as another prophet had predicted. When they washed his chariot by a pool in Samaria, dogs licked up his blood. The first part of the prophecy came true. After Ahab died, his son Ahaziah became king. But he only ruled for 2 years. Then he died from injuries after falling. Another son of Ahab took the throne. His name was Joram, though some called him Jehoram. Joram was not as wicked as his father and mother. He got rid of the sacred stone of Baal that his father had made, but he still clung to some of the sins that had infected Israel. He did not turn fully back to God. But Jezebel was still alive. She still lived in the palace. She still had power and influence. The years had passed, but her wickedness had not changed. The prophecy about her death had not yet been fulfilled. Meanwhile, there was a commander in Israel's army named Jehu. He was a bold and fierce warrior. He drove his chariot furiously. Everyone recognized his driving from far away. One day, the prophet Elisha sent one of his young prophets to find Jehu. The young man traveled to Ramoth-Gilead, where the army was stationed. He found Jehu with the other officers. He called Jehu aside into an inner room. There he poured oil on Jehu's head. He anointed him king over Israel. The young prophet spoke the words God had given him. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel. You are to destroy the house of Ahab your master. I will avenge the blood of my servants the prophets. I will avenge the blood of all the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish." Then the prophet spoke specifically about Jezebel once more. "As for Jezebel, dogs will devour her on the plot of ground at Jezreel. No one will bury her." The young prophet opened the door and ran. He fled as fast as he could. Jehu went back to his fellow officers. They asked him what that crazy man wanted. Jehu was hesitant at first, but then he told them, "He anointed me king over Israel." Immediately the officers took off their cloaks. They spread them under Jehu on the bare steps. They blew the trumpet. They shouted, "Jehu is king." Jehu wasted no time. He plotted to kill Joram. He told his men to let no one escape to warn the king. Then he got in his chariot and rode to Jezreel. Joram was there recovering from wounds he had received in battle. Ahaziah, the king of Judah, had come to visit him. The lookout standing on the tower in Jezreel saw Jehu's troops approaching. He called down, "I see some troops coming." Joram ordered, "Get a horseman and send him to meet them. Have him ask if they come in peace." The horseman rode out to meet Jehu. "This is what the king says. Do you come in peace?" Jehu answered, "What do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me." The lookout reported, "The messenger has reached them, but he is not coming back." So the king sent out a second horseman. He reached Jehu and said, "This is what the king says. Do you come in peace?" Again Jehu replied, "What do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me." The lookout reported again, "He has reached them, but he is not coming back either." The driving is like that of Jehu son of Nimshi. He drives like a madman. Now Joram was worried. "Hitch up my chariot," he ordered. They hitched up his chariot. Joram king of Israel and Ahaziah king of Judah rode out to meet Jehu. Each was in his own chariot. They met him at the plot of ground that had belonged to Naboth. When Joram saw Jehu, he asked, "Have you come in peace, Jehu?" Jehu's response was harsh. "How can there be peace as long as all the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" Joram realized the danger. He wheeled around and fled. He cried out to Ahaziah, "Treachery, Ahaziah." But Jehu drew his bow. He shot an arrow that struck Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart. He slumped down in his chariot. Jehu told his officer to throw the body on the field that had belonged to Naboth. The prophecy was being fulfilled. Ahaziah tried to escape, but Jehu's men pursued him. They wounded him too. He fled to Megiddo, where he died. His servants carried his body to Jerusalem and buried him. Now Jehu rode on to Jezreel. When Jezebel heard what was happening, she knew her time had come. But she would not cower in fear. She would not beg for mercy. She would face death as she had lived, with defiance, with pride, with arrogance. Jezebel prepared herself carefully. She painted her eyes with makeup. She arranged her hair. She made herself look as regal and commanding as possible. Then she looked out the window at the top of the palace. When Jehu entered the gate, Jezebel called down to him. She tried to taunt him. She tried to compare him to another man who had killed his master. But her words had no power now. Jehu looked up at the window. He called out, "Who is on my side?" "Who?" 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him from the window. These were palace servants who had watched Jezebel's wickedness for years. Perhaps they had been afraid of her. Perhaps they had suffered under her cruelty. Now they had a choice. Jehu gave them an order. "Throw her down." The eunuchs did not hesitate. They grabbed Jezebel. They threw her out of the window. She fell through the air. Her body struck the ground below with terrible force. Some of her blood splattered on the wall. Some splattered on the horses as they trampled her underfoot. Jehu went inside. He ate and drank. After he had refreshed himself, he gave an order. "Take care of that cursed woman. Bury her." After all, she was a king's daughter. The servants went out to bury her. But when they got there, they found almost nothing left. Dogs had already devoured most of her body. All they found was her skull. They found her feet. They found her hands. That was all. They went back and told Jehu. When he heard this, he remembered the prophecy. This is the word of the Lord that he spoke through his servant Elijah. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. Jezebel's body will be like dung on the ground in the plot at Jezreel. No one will be able to say this was Jezebel. The proud queen who had killed God's prophets was dead. The woman who had introduced the worship of Baal to Israel was gone. The queen who had plotted murder and stolen land was finished. She had lived for power. She had lived for her false gods. She had lived without fear of the true God. But God had the last word. His justice came, though it took years. His prophecy was fulfilled exactly. Jezebel's end was shameful and horrible, just as Elijah had predicted. Dogs ate her body. She had no proper burial. No tomb, no monument, no honor. Her name became a symbol of wickedness and evil. The story of Jezebel teaches us many things. It shows us that wickedness does not go unpunished forever. It reminds us that God sees everything we do. It warns us about the danger of turning away from God to follow false gods and idols. It reveals the terrible influence one wicked person can have on others. And the story reminds us that God keeps His promises. When He speaks through His prophets, His words come true. Elijah said there would be no rain, and the drought came. Elijah said Ahab's blood would be licked by dogs, and it happened. Elijah said Jezebel would be eaten by dogs at Jezreel, and it came to pass exactly. Years later, when the New Testament was written, Jezebel's name was still remembered as a warning. In the book of Revelation, a false teacher in the church of Thyatira was compared to Jezebel. She was leading people astray just as the ancient queen had done. The name Jezebel became a byword for wickedness and false teaching. Jezebel's story ended in tragedy because she refused to bow to God. But she wasn't the only proud ruler in the Bible. There was a king even more powerful than her, a man who built the greatest empire on earth. He thought he could be like God Himself. This mighty king would lose his mind, his throne, and even his humanity, all because of pride. His name was Nebuchadnezzar. But let's rewind a bit to where it all started with his father. In the city of Babylon, a place of wonder and power in those days, there ruled a king named Nebuchadnezzar. This king had built his kingdom strong, crushing the old Assyrian empire that had terrorized the world for so long. He was a warrior, a builder, a man of great ambition. And he had a son. The son's name was Nebuchadnezzar. From his earliest days, young Nebuchadnezzar learned the ways of war and the arts of ruling. He watched his father command armies. He studied the movements of soldiers and the strategies of generals. He learned how to read the faces of advisors and how to speak words that would make men follow him into battle. The young prince grew tall and strong. His mind was sharp like a blade. His father saw greatness in him, and so he gave him command of the armies while he was still young. This was not a small gift. This was the power to shape the world. Far to the west, beyond the desert sands, the land of Egypt had grown powerful again. The pharaoh there, a man named Necho, had his own dreams of empire. He marched his armies north, wanting to claim the lands that had once belonged to the Assyrians. But Nebuchadnezzar, the old king of Babylon, would not allow this. He sent his son, Nebuchadnezzar, with a mighty army to stop the Egyptians. The two great forces met at a place called Carchemish, near the great river Euphrates. It was the year 605 before the Common Era would begin. The battle was fierce and terrible. Swords clashed against shields, arrows darkened the sky like swarms of locusts. Chariots thundered across the plains. The dust rose so high it seemed to touch the clouds. Nebuchadnezzar proved himself that day. He was not just the son of a king. He was a warrior born. His strategies were brilliant. His courage inspired his men. The Babylonian army crushed the Egyptians completely. Pharaoh Necho's forces scattered like leaves before a storm wind. They fled south, back toward their own land, defeated and broken. The victory was total. The victory was glorious. But then, in the midst of his triumph, news came to Nebuchadnezzar that changed everything. His father, King Nebuchadnezzar, had died. Nebuchadnezzar did not hesitate. He left his army in the capable hands of his generals and raced back to Babylon. He rode across the desert like the wind itself, desperate to reach the city before anyone could challenge his right to the throne. He need not have worried. When he arrived in Babylon, the people welcomed him. The priests blessed him. The nobles bowed before him. He was crowned king of Babylon, ruler of the greatest empire the world had seen since the days of the ancient kingdoms. Now Nebuchadnezzar sat upon the throne of power. Now the world would learn to fear and respect his name. He was young, perhaps only in his 20s, but he ruled with the authority of someone much older. His victories had proven his worth. His inheritance had given him legitimacy. His ambition would drive him to heights no king had reached before. Nebuchadnezzar was not content to simply hold what his father had won. He wanted more. He wanted to build an empire that would make the old Assyrian kingdom look small. He wanted every nation to bow before Babylon. He turned his armies west, toward the lands along the Great Sea. One by one, the cities and kingdoms fell before him. The Phoenician cities, famous for their purple dye and their ships, submitted to his rule. The small kingdoms of Syria became his vassals. He collected tribute from them all, gold and silver, precious stones and fine goods. And there was one small kingdom that caught his particular attention. It was called Judah. It was not large. It was not wealthy compared to the great cities of the world. But it sat at a crossroads of trade routes between Egypt to the south and Babylon to the east. It had strategic value. And it had something else. The people of Judah worshipped a God they claimed was the only true God. They called him Yahweh, the Lord. They said he had made the heavens and the earth. They said he had chosen them as his special people. They had prophets who spoke in his name and a temple in their capital city of Jerusalem, where they offered sacrifices to him. Nebuchadnezzar had heard of this God, but he did not believe such claims. He had his own gods, the gods of Babylon. There was Marduk, the chief god. There was Nabu, the god of wisdom, for whom Nebuchadnezzar himself was named. These were the gods who had given him victory. These were the gods he would honor. In the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim's reign over Judah, Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem with his army. The city was strong, built on hills, with thick walls. But Nebuchadnezzar's army was stronger. He surrounded the city. He cut off supplies. He waited. King Jehoiakim, seeing that resistance was futile, surrendered. Nebuchadnezzar could have destroyed the city. He could have killed the king. But he chose a different path. He would make Judah his vassal state. He would let them keep their king, but they would serve him and pay him tribute. He did take treasures, though. He took some of the sacred vessels from the temple of the Lord, the beautiful golden cups and bowls that the Jewish priests used in their worship. These he carried back to Babylon and placed in the temple of his own god, Marduk. It was a symbol. Your God serves my God. Your nation serves my nation. He also took something else. He took some of the young nobles of Judah, the best and brightest of their youth. These would come to Babylon. They would be educated in Babylonian ways. They would learn the language and literature of the Chaldeans, as the Babylonians were sometimes called. They would serve in the king's court. This was clever policy. Take the children of the nobles as hostages, and their parents would not dare rebel. Educate them in your ways, and they would become loyal servants. It was wisdom mixed with cruelty, as so much of kingship was in those ancient days. Among those young men taken from Jerusalem were 4 whose names would become famous. Their Hebrew names were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But in Babylon, they were given new names. Daniel became Belteshazzar. Hananiah became Shadrach. Mishael became Meshach. Azariah became Abednego. These young men were probably teenagers, perhaps 15 or 16 years old. They came from noble families. They were handsome, intelligent, and well-educated. The chief of the king's officials, a man named Ashpenaz, was ordered to train them. They were to eat the king's food and drink the king's wine. After 3 years of training, they would enter the king's service. But Daniel and his 3 friends had a problem with this plan. Their God had given them laws about what they could and could not eat. The rich food and wine from the king's table might have been offered to idols. It might have included meats that their law forbade. To eat it would be to compromise their faith. Daniel, though young, was brave and wise. He asked the official in charge of them if they might eat only vegetables and drink only water. The official was worried. What if they became weak and thin? The king would have his head. But Daniel convinced him to try it for just 10 days. If after 10 days they looked worse than the other young men, they would go back to the king's food. The official agreed. 10 days passed. When he looked at Daniel and his friends, he was amazed. They looked healthier than all the other young men who had been eating the royal food. So he let them continue with their simple diet. God blessed these 4 young men for their faithfulness. He gave them knowledge and understanding in all kinds of literature and learning. And to Daniel, he gave something special. He gave him the ability to understand visions and dreams of all kinds. In the 2nd year of his reign, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. It was not an ordinary dream. It shook him to his very soul. He woke up in the middle of the night, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He knew this dream was important. He knew it meant something. But what? He called for his wise men. Babylon was famous for its magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers. These men claimed to know the secrets of the heavens and the mysteries of the future. They came before the king, ready to help. But Nebuchadnezzar tested them. He told them that he wanted them to tell him both what he had dreamed and what it meant. If they could do this, he would reward them richly. If they could not, he would have them all cut to pieces and their houses destroyed. The wise men were shocked. No king had ever asked such a thing. They could interpret a dream if they were told what it was, but how could they know what someone else had dreamed? They told the king this was impossible. No one could do what he asked except the gods, and the gods did not live among men. This answer enraged Nebuchadnezzar. His anger burned hot. He gave an order that all the wise men of Babylon should be killed, all of them. And because Daniel and his friends had been trained among the wise men, this included them. When the soldiers came to arrest Daniel and take him to his death, he asked to speak to Arioch, the commander of the king's guard. He asked why the king had issued such a harsh decree. Arioch explained the situation. Daniel did something remarkable then. He asked for time. He said he would interpret the dream for the king. This was bold. This was dangerous. If he failed, he would certainly die. But Daniel had faith in his God. He went back to his house and told his 3 friends what was happening. The 4 young men prayed together. They asked the God of heaven to show them the mystery, to reveal the king's dream and its meaning, so that they would not be killed along with all the other wise men of Babylon. That night, in a vision, God revealed the mystery to Daniel. He showed him what the king had dreamed. He showed him what it meant. Daniel praised God with all his heart. He thanked him for his wisdom and power. He acknowledged that it was God who changes times and seasons, who sets up kings and deposes them, who gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. In the morning, Daniel went to Arioch. He told him not to execute the wise men. He said he could tell the king what his dream meant. Arioch quickly brought him before Nebuchadnezzar. The king looked at this young Hebrew captive standing before him. He asked if Daniel could really tell him what he had dreamed and what it meant. Daniel's answer was humble and wise. He said that no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner could explain this mystery to the king. But there was a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. This God had shown King Nebuchadnezzar what would happen in days to come. Then Daniel described the dream. The king had seen a large statue. It was enormous and awesome. Its head was made of pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron. Its feet were partly iron and partly baked clay. As the king watched, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. This rock struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the whole statue collapsed. The iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold were broken to pieces at the same time. They became like chaff on a threshing floor in summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes grew wide as Daniel spoke. Yes, this was exactly what he had seen. But what did it mean? Daniel explained. The king himself was the head of gold. The God of heaven had given him dominion and power and might and glory. He had made him ruler over all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever people lived, God had made him ruler over them all. He was the head of gold. But after him would come another kingdom, inferior to his, represented by the silver. Then a third kingdom, one of bronze, would rule over the whole earth. Finally, there would be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. It would crush and break all the others. But this kingdom would be divided, partly strong and partly brittle, like the feet of iron and clay. And in the time of those kings, the God of heaven would set up a kingdom that would never be destroyed. It would crush all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it would itself endure forever. This was the meaning of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. Daniel finished speaking. The throne room was silent. Then King Nebuchadnezzar did something astonishing. He fell prostrate before Daniel. He ordered that an offering be presented to him. He said, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." The king gave Daniel a high position. He gave him many gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Daniel asked the king to appoint his 3 friends to administrative positions in the province as well, and the king agreed. Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Years passed. Nebuchadnezzar continued to expand his empire. He built Babylon into the most magnificent city the world had ever seen. He constructed the famous Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Terraced gardens that rose high above the city like a mountain of green in the midst of the desert. He rebuilt the Temple of Marduk, making it more glorious than ever. He fortified the city walls until they were so thick that chariots could race along the top of them. His pride grew with each achievement. He had been told he was the head of gold. He had been told that his kingdom was given to him by the God of heaven. Perhaps this went to his head. One day he ordered that a great image be made. It was to be 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. It was to be made entirely of gold, or at least covered in gold. This image was set up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar summoned all his officials. The satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials had to come to the dedication of this image. They gathered before the towering statue, glittering in the sun. A herald proclaimed the king's command. When the music played, when they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, everyone was to fall down and worship the golden image. Anyone who did not fall down and worship would immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So when the music played, all the people fell down. They bowed to the ground. They worshiped the image, all of them. All except 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego remained standing. They would not bow. They could not bow. Their God had commanded them not to worship idols. They feared God more than they feared the king. Some astrologers noticed this. Perhaps they were jealous of these foreigners who had been given such high positions. They went to the king and denounced the 3 Jews. They told Nebuchadnezzar that these men were defying his command. They were not serving his gods. They were not worshiping the golden image. Nebuchadnezzar was furious. His rage knew no bounds. He ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they stood in front of him, he gave them one more chance. He asked if what he had heard was true. He told them that when the music played again, they must fall down and worship the image. If they did, good, but if they did not, they would be thrown into the blazing furnace. Then he added, with the arrogance of absolute power, then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? The three young men answered calmly. They said that they did not need to defend themselves before the king in this matter. If they were thrown into the blazing furnace, the God they served was able to deliver them from it. He would rescue them from the king's hand. But even if he did not, they wanted the king to know that they would not serve his gods or worship the golden image. This answer made Nebuchadnezzar even angrier. His face became distorted with rage. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual. He commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace. The soldiers did as they were commanded. They tied up the 3 men, still wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes. The furnace was so hot that the flames killed the soldiers who threw them in. The 3 Jews fell into the fire, bound and helpless. But then something impossible happened. King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement. He asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They confirmed that yes, there had been 3. The king said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the blazing furnace. He shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here." The 3 men walked out of the fire. All the officials gathered around them. The fire had not harmed their bodies. Their hair was not singed. Their robes were not scorched. There was not even a smell of fire on them. The king declared, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. He issued a decree that no one in any nation or language could say anything against the God of these 3 men, for no other God could save in this way. Then he promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar seemed to learn something from these encounters with the God of the Hebrews. But pride is a persistent thing. It grows back like a weed, even when you think you have pulled it out by the roots. One night, Nebuchadnezzar had another dream. Again, it terrified him. The images and visions that passed through his mind while he slept filled him with fear. He called for all the wise men of Babylon again, the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He told them his dream this time, but none of them could interpret it. Finally, Daniel came in. The king called him by his Babylonian name, Belteshazzar, the name that contained the name of the king's god. Nebuchadnezzar told him the dream because he knew that the spirit of the holy gods was in Daniel. No mystery was too difficult for him. In the dream, the king had seen a tree. It was in the middle of the earth, and it was enormous. The tree grew large and strong. Its top touched the sky. It could be seen from the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant. It provided food for everyone. Wild animals found shelter under it. Birds lived in its branches. Every creature was fed from it. As the king watched, a messenger, a holy one, came down from heaven. He called out in a loud voice. He commanded that the tree be cut down and its branches stripped off. Its leaves must be scattered and its fruit dispersed. The animals must flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But the stump and roots were to be left in the ground, bound with iron and bronze, in the grass of the field. Then the messenger said something strange. This person, this tree, would be drenched with the dew of heaven. He would live with the animals among the plants of the earth. His mind would be changed from that of a man to that of an animal. 7 times would pass by for him. This was decreed by the holy ones, so that the living would know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes, even the lowliest of people. When Daniel heard this dream, he was troubled. He was perplexed for a time. His thoughts terrified him. The king urged him to speak, not to let the dream or its meaning alarm him. Daniel began carefully. He wished the dream applied to the king's enemies instead of to the king himself. But he had to speak the truth. The tree was the king. Nebuchadnezzar had become great and strong. His greatness had grown until it reached the sky. His dominion extended to distant parts of the earth. But the command to cut down the tree, this was a decree from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar would be driven away from people. He would live with the wild animals. He would eat grass like cattle. He would be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times, 7 periods of time would pass by for him. This would continue until he acknowledged that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump and roots meant that the king's kingdom would be restored to him when he acknowledged that heaven rules. Then Daniel gave the king advice. He urged him to renounce his sins by doing what was right. He should renounce his wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. Perhaps then his prosperity would continue. But Nebuchadnezzar did not listen. 12 months passed. One day the king was walking on the roof of his royal palace in Babylon. He looked out over the magnificent city he had built. The buildings stretched in every direction. The walls were massive and impregnable. The temples and palaces gleamed in the sun. The hanging gardens cascaded down in terraces of green. Pride swelled in his heart. He said, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. It said, "This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes." Immediately, the prophecy was fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar was driven away from people. He lost his sanity. His mind became like that of an animal. He ate grass like cattle. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven. His hair grew long like the feathers of an eagle. His nails became like the claws of a bird. For 7 periods of time, the mighty king who had conquered nations lived like a beast in the fields. His kingdom was governed by others in his absence. The man who had been the head of gold, the ruler of the world's greatest empire, now crawled on the ground and ate grass. But the 7 times passed, as God had decreed. At the end of that period, Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes toward heaven. His sanity returned to him, and then he did what he should have done long before. He praised the Most High. He honored and glorified him who lives forever. He declared that God's dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. God does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" When his sanity returned, his honor and splendor were restored to him for the glory of his kingdom. His advisors and nobles sought him out. He was restored to his throne. He became even greater than before. This proud king, who had thought himself the maker of his own destiny, the builder of his own glory, now understood the truth. He praised and exalted and glorified the King of Heaven. He acknowledged that everything God does is right and all his ways are just. He learned that those who walk in pride, God is able to humble. After his restoration, Nebuchadnezzar continued to rule over Babylon. His kingdom remained strong. But something in him had changed. The man who had once attributed everything to his own power now knew there was a greater power above him. He continued his building projects. The walls of Babylon remained impregnable. The city continued to be the wonder of the world. Trade flowed through it from every nation. Tribute came from conquered peoples. But there were problems too. The kingdom of Judah, which had submitted to him years before, proved troublesome. The kings there kept thinking they could ally with Egypt and throw off the Babylonian yoke. This was foolish. This was rebellion. And Nebuchadnezzar had to deal with it. King Jehoiakim of Judah, who had submitted to Nebuchadnezzar at first, rebelled against him after 3 years. This was a mistake. Nebuchadnezzar sent Babylonian raiders against him, along with raiders from Aram, Moab, and Ammon. Jehoiakim died, perhaps killed in one of these raids, and his son Jehoiachin became king. Jehoiachin was only 18 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem for just 3 months. Then Nebuchadnezzar himself came to the city with his army. This time he took much more. He carried off all the treasures from the temple of the Lord and from the royal palace. He cut up all the gold articles that Solomon, king of Israel, had made for the temple. He carried all Jerusalem into exile, all the officers and fighting men, and all the skilled workers and artisans. 10,000 people were taken away. Only the poorest people of the land were left. Nebuchadnezzar took Jehoiachin captive to Babylon, along with the king's mother, his wives, his officials, and the prominent people of the land. He took the whole army of 7,000 fighting men and 1,000 skilled workers and artisans. All of them were strong and fit for war. In Jehoiachin's place, Nebuchadnezzar made Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king. He changed Mattaniah's name to Zedekiah. This was another way of showing dominance. I will even choose your name. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 11 years. But he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. He rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar. This was incredibly foolish. The people of Judah had prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. One of them was Jeremiah. He told them again and again not to rebel. He said that God had given them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. He said they should submit and live. If they rebelled, the city would be destroyed. But Zedekiah did not listen. He listened instead to other prophets, false prophets who told him what he wanted to hear. They said God would protect Jerusalem. They said the city could never fall. They said Egypt would help them. So Zedekiah rebelled. He made an alliance with Egypt. He refused to pay tribute to Babylon. This was the end for Jerusalem. In the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, Nebuchadnezzar marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. It was the 10th day of the 10th month. They laid siege to the city. They built siege works all around it. The city was surrounded. No one could get in. No one could get out. The siege lasted for 2 years. Inside the city, food ran out. People began to starve. They ate anything they could find. The suffering was terrible. Still, the city held out. The walls remained strong. But eventually, even the strongest walls fall if no help comes. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through. King Zedekiah and his soldiers tried to flee. They left the city at night through the gate between the 2 walls near the king's garden. They headed toward the Jordan Valley, hoping to escape across the river. But the Babylonian army pursued them. They overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho. His soldiers were separated from him and scattered. The Babylonians captured Zedekiah and brought him to Nebuchadnezzar at Riblah in the land of Hamath. There, Nebuchadnezzar pronounced sentence on him. It was a terrible sentence. They killed Zedekiah's sons before his eyes. Then they put out Zedekiah's eyes. They bound him with bronze shackles and took him to Babylon. The last thing Zedekiah saw was his sons being killed. Nebuchadnezzar sent Nebuzaradan, the commander of his imperial guard, to Jerusalem. On the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, this commander entered Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord. He set fire to the royal palace. He set fire to all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army under the commander of the guard broke down the walls around Jerusalem. The commander took into exile the people who remained in the city. He took those who had gone over to the king of Babylon and the rest of the population. But he left behind some of the poorest people of the land to work the vineyards and fields. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars that were in the temple of the Lord. They broke up the bronze stands in the bronze sea that were there. They carried all the bronze to Babylon. They took away the pots, shovels, wick trimmers, dishes, and all the bronze articles used in the temple service. They took away the basins, censers, sprinkling bowls, pots, lampstands, dishes, and bowls used for drink offerings. Everything made of pure gold or silver, the commander took away. The temple that Solomon had built, the beautiful house of God that had taken 7 years to construct, was destroyed. Jerusalem, the city of David, lay in ruins. The kingdom of Judah was no more. The people of Judah were taken to Babylon. They joined those who had been taken in the earlier deportations. They lived in exile in a foreign land. They hung their harps on the willow trees and wept when they remembered Jerusalem. Their captors asked them to sing songs of Zion. But how could they sing the Lord's songs in a foreign land? They wondered if they would ever see their homeland again. They wondered if God had abandoned them forever. But some of the prophets told them this exile would not last forever. Jeremiah had prophesied that after 70 years, God would bring them back. He would restore them to their land. This was both a punishment and a mercy. God was disciplining his people, but he had not cast them off completely. Meanwhile, Daniel and his friends continued to serve in Nebuchadnezzar's court. Daniel, in particular, rose to great prominence. He continued to interpret dreams and visions. He continued to be faithful to his God, even in this pagan land. His wisdom was legendary. His integrity was unquestioned. King Nebuchadnezzar ruled for 43 years. During that time, he transformed Babylon into the greatest city the world had ever seen. The city walls were so thick that chariot races could be held on top of them. The Ishtar Gate, covered in blue glazed bricks and decorated with images of dragons and bulls, was a wonder to behold. The processional way that led through it was magnificent. The hanging gardens that he built, probably for his wife, who missed the mountains of her homeland, became famous throughout the world. Terraced gardens rose high above the city, irrigated by an ingenious system that brought water up from the Euphrates River. Trees and flowers and vines grew in abundance, creating a mountain of green in the midst of the desert city. The temple of Marduk, which Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt, was enormous. Its ziggurat tower rose high toward the heavens. Some say this was the origin of the story of the Tower of Babel, though that story came from much earlier times. Still, Babylon was known for its tower that seemed to reach to heaven. Nebuchadnezzar was a builder, a conqueror, and a king who thought himself a god. But he learned, through painful experience, that there was a power greater than his own. He learned that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whom he will. In his later years, after his period of madness and restoration, there is evidence that he became more humble. The proud declarations on his monuments give way to more measured language. The king who once took all credit for himself now sometimes acknowledged the gods who had helped him. Whether he ever truly came to worship the God of Daniel, the God of the Hebrews, we do not know for certain. But he acknowledged that this God was powerful. He admitted that this God could humble the proud. He issued decrees praising this God. Eventually, like all men, Nebuchadnezzar died. The year was probably 562 before the Common Era. He had ruled for 4 decades. He had built an empire. He had made Babylon glorious. He had conquered nations. He had humbled himself before God and been restored. We've seen how God humbled the mighty King Nebuchadnezzar. Now let's rewind much further back in time, to when God's people were just entering the Promised Land. Their first challenge? A city with walls so thick and high, no army could break through. But God had a very strange battle plan. Let's explore the story of the fall of the walls of Jericho. The sun blazed hot over the desert as thousands of people walked through sand and stone. These were the children of Israel. Their feet were tough from years of wandering. Their faces were weathered by wind and sun. They had been slaves once, long years ago in Egypt. But those days were behind them now. Their ancestors were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These great fathers had received promises from God, promises of land and blessing and descendants as numerous as the stars. For generations, the family had lived in Egypt. They built cities for Pharaoh. They mixed mud and straw into bricks under the brutal sun. They cried out to heaven for freedom. Then came Moses. Moses was a man who had seen God in a burning bush. He had stood before Pharaoh and demanded freedom. When Pharaoh refused, plagues fell upon Egypt like hammer blows. Water turned to blood. Frogs covered every surface. Lice tormented people and animals. Flies swarmed in black clouds. Livestock died. Boils erupted on skin. Hail destroyed the crops. Locusts devoured what remained. Darkness covered the land for 3 days. Finally, the 10th plague brought death to every firstborn son in Egypt. Only then did Pharaoh break. Only then did he let the Israelites go. They walked out of Egypt carrying the wealth of their former masters. The Egyptians practically threw gold and silver at them, begging them to leave before more disaster struck. 600,000 men left Egypt that night, plus women and children. The number was staggering. It was not just an escape. It was an exodus. But Pharaoh changed his mind. He sent his army after them. The Israelites found themselves trapped between the Red Sea and the approaching chariots. Death seemed certain. Then God split the sea in two. The people walked through on dry ground with walls of water on either side. When the Egyptian army tried to follow, the waters crashed down and swallowed them whole. That should have been the end of the story. They should have marched straight into the Promised Land. It was only a short journey from Egypt to Canaan. But the people did not trust God. When they reached the border and sent spies into the land, 10 of the 12 spies came back terrified. They reported that giants lived in Canaan, fortified cities with massive walls. Armies too strong to defeat. Only 2 spies believed God would give them victory. Their names were Joshua and Caleb. They pleaded with the people to trust God and go forward. But the people refused. They wanted to return to Egypt. That refusal cost them dearly. God declared that the entire generation of adults would die in the wilderness. They would wander for 40 years until every doubter was dead. Only their children would enter the Promised Land. Only Joshua and Caleb from the old generation would cross over. So they wandered, year after year in the desert. A whole generation lived and died among the rocks and sand. Their children grew strong. These young people did not remember Egypt. They only knew the wilderness and the God who provided for them. Every morning, bread from heaven appeared on the ground like frost. They called it manna. Water flowed from rocks when Moses struck them with his staff. God's presence went with them as a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. Those 40 years changed them. The slaves became warriors. The fearful became faithful. They learned to fight. They defeated enemies who attacked them. They captured territory on the eastern side of the Jordan River. They grew into a nation that trusted God. Moses led them all those years. He taught them God's laws. He judged their disputes. He interceded when they sinned. He was prophet, teacher, judge, and shepherd all at once. But Moses also grew old. His time was coming to an end. Before he died, Moses climbed Mount Nebo. From the peak, he could see the entire Promised Land spread before him. Green valleys, flowing rivers, cities on hills, forests and fields. Everything God had promised to Abraham was there, beautiful and waiting. God spoke to Moses on that mountain. "This is the land I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I promised I would give it to their descendants. I have let you see it with your own eyes, but you will not cross over into it." Moses had made a mistake years before. In a moment of anger, he had struck a rock instead of speaking to it as God commanded. That sin kept him from entering the Promised Land. It was a harsh consequence, but it showed that even the greatest leaders must obey God completely. Moses died there on the mountain. He was 120 years old. His eyes were still clear. His strength had not left him. But his work was done. The people mourned for 30 days. They had lost the only leader most of them had ever known. Then God spoke to Joshua. Joshua, son of Nun, had been Moses' assistant for decades. He was a warrior. He had led the army in battle. He had been one of the 2 faithful spies. He had watched Moses closely and learned from him. Now God was calling him to finish what Moses had started. "Moses, my servant, is dead," God said to Joshua. "Now you must get ready. You and all these people must cross the Jordan River. You must enter the land I am giving to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot. This is what I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river Euphrates to the Mediterranean Sea. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them." God repeated the command 3 times. Be strong and courageous. Joshua would need that strength. He would need that courage. The task ahead was enormous. He had to lead millions of people into a hostile land. He had to conquer fortified cities. He had to defeat armies and kings. But God promised to be with him. That promise made all the difference. Joshua gathered the officers of the people. He gave them clear instructions. Go through the camp and tell the people to get their provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan River to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. The camp buzzed with activity. 3 days. After 40 years in the wilderness, they would finally cross into the promised land in 3 days. People packed their belongings. Mothers prepared food. Fathers sharpened weapons. Children asked endless questions. Excitement and nervousness filled the air. But Joshua knew he needed more than excitement. He needed information. Across the Jordan River stood a city called Jericho. It guarded the entrance to Canaan like a fortress. Whoever controlled Jericho controlled access to the hill country beyond. Joshua needed to know what he was facing. He called 2 of his most trusted men. They were scouts. They could move silently and observe carefully. Go and look over the land, Joshua told them quietly. Especially study Jericho. Learn everything you can about the city and its defenses. Then come back and report to me. The 2 men left that same night. They moved like shadows. When they reached the Jordan River, they found a place to cross in the darkness. The river was swollen with spring rains and melting snow from the mountains. But they made it across. They traveled through the night until they saw the walls of Jericho rising before them. Jericho was an ancient city. Archaeological evidence suggests people had lived there for thousands of years. Its location was perfect. It sat in a valley with springs providing fresh water. Palm trees grew around it. The climate was warm. Trade routes passed nearby. But what made Jericho truly formidable was its walls. The city had 2 walls. The outer wall was 6 feet thick and perhaps 30 feet high. Behind it stood an inner wall that was 12 feet thick. These were not simple barriers. They were massive fortifications made of stone and mud brick. Houses were built between the walls and on top of them. Towers rose even higher, giving guards a clear view of the surrounding countryside. The gates were thick wood reinforced with bronze. When those gates closed, nothing could get in or out. The spies studied the walls from a distance. Then they slipped into the city. The gates would close at sunset, so they had to move quickly. They passed through the gate with other travelers just before it shut for the night. Now they were inside. They needed a place to hide and gather information. They found themselves in a street near the wall. A woman stood in a doorway. She looked at them carefully. Something in her expression made them pause. She stepped back and gestured for them to come inside quickly. They glanced at each other, then followed her. Her name was Rahab. She made her living as a prostitute. Her house was built right into the city wall. Part of her home extended over the wall, with a window that opened to the outside. She was not a respectable woman by Jericho's standards, but she was about to become one of the heroes of Israel's story. The moment the spies entered, Rahab shut the door. "You are Israelites," she said. It was not a question. "The king's men are searching for you. They know spies have entered the city." Even as she spoke, heavy footsteps sounded in the street outside. Rahab moved quickly. "Follow me." She led them upstairs to the flat roof of her house. On the roof, stalks of flax lay drying in neat rows. She pulled back some of the flax. "Lie down here." The spies lay flat on the roof. Rahab covered them completely with the stalks of flax. The dried plants concealed them perfectly. Just as she finished, fists pounded on her door. Rahab went back downstairs. She composed herself and opened the door calmly. Several of the king's soldiers stood there. Their captain looked at her with hard eyes. "We know men came to your house tonight," he said. "They are Israelite spies. The king commands you to bring them out." Rahab met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, some men did come to me earlier, but I had no idea where they came from. They left at dusk, just as the gates were about to close. I do not know which direction they went. If you hurry, you can probably catch them." The captain studied her face. Rahab was known in the city. She dealt with many visitors. Her story seemed plausible. He made a quick decision. "Men, with me. They are heading for the river fords." The soldiers ran out through the city gate. Their horses thundered away into the darkness. They raced toward the Jordan River, certain the spies were fleeing back to their camp. Behind them, the massive city gates swung shut. The heavy wooden bar dropped into place. Jericho was sealed for the night. Rahab climbed back to her roof. She removed the flax covering the spies. They stood up, brushing dried plant material from their clothes. They looked at her with wonder and gratitude. This foreign woman had just risked her life to save theirs. Rahab spoke urgently. Her words came from deep in her heart. "I know the Lord has given this land to you. I know that terror of you has fallen on us. Everyone who lives in this country is melting in fear because of you. We have heard the reports. We heard how the Lord dried up the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. We heard what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan. You completely destroyed them. When we heard these things, our hearts melted in fear. No one has courage anymore because of you. The Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below." The spies listened carefully. This was valuable intelligence. The people of Jericho were already terrified. Their courage had evaporated before a single blow was struck. But more than that, this woman had faith. She believed in Israel's God. She recognized his power. She trusted his authority over all creation. Rahab continued, "Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family. I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and everyone who belongs to them. Promise you will save us from death when your army comes." The two spies looked at each other. They understood the weight of what she was asking. They also understood the debt they owed her. Without hesitation, they made their promise. "Our lives for your lives," they declared. "If you do not tell anyone what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. This we swear before God." But they still faced a problem. The city gates were locked. Guards patrolled the walls. How would they escape? Rahab had already thought of this. She produced a strong rope, long and thick. "My window opens to the outside of the wall," she explained. "I will lower you down with this rope. Once you are on the ground, go to the hills. Hide there for 3 days until the king's soldiers return from searching. After that, you can safely make your way back to your camp." Before they left, the spies gave Rahab specific instructions. One of them pulled something from his bag. It was a scarlet cord, bright red and unmistakable. "When our army comes to attack Jericho, you must tie this cord in the window through which you let us down. Bring your father and mother into this house. Bring all your brothers and sisters and everyone in your family. They must all be inside this house. If anyone goes out into the street, their blood will be on their own head. We will not be responsible, but if a hand is laid on anyone who is in the house with you, their blood will be on our head. However, if you tell anyone what we are doing, we will be released from this oath you made us swear." Rahab took the scarlet cord in her hands. She understood perfectly. This cord would mark her house for salvation. When judgment fell on Jericho, this marker would tell the Israelite soldiers to spare everyone inside. "Agreed," she said firmly. "Let it be as you say." She led them to her window. The window opened to the outside, overlooking the area beyond the city wall. It was a considerable drop to the ground below. Rahab tied one end of the rope securely. She tested it to make sure it would hold. Then she began lowering the first spy down the wall. He descended carefully, hand over hand, until his feet touched the ground. She pulled the rope back up and lowered the second spy. When both men were safely down, they looked up at her silhouette in the window. They could not wave or call out without risking detection. But she knew they were grateful. They melted into the darkness and were gone. Rahab pulled the rope back inside. She immediately tied the scarlet cord in its place. Let it hang there as a sign, a marker of hope, the promise of salvation. She would not remove it. She would trust that the Israelite spies were men of their word. The two spies ran through the night. They headed for the hills, just as Rahab had advised. When they reached the rocky highlands, they found a cave and hid themselves. For 3 days they stayed concealed while the king's soldiers searched the roads and paths. The soldiers looked everywhere, convinced the spies had fled toward the Jordan. They never thought to search the hills. On the 3rd day, the soldiers gave up. They returned to Jericho empty-handed and frustrated. The gates opened to let them back in, then closed again. The city remained sealed. Fear continued to grow inside those walls. The spies emerged from their hiding place. They made their way down from the hills. When they reached the Jordan River, they found a place to cross. The current was strong, but they were determined. They swam and waited until they reached the other side. Then they ran through the Israelite camp straight to Joshua's tent. Joshua looked up as they entered. He had been praying and planning for 3 days, waiting for their return. The spies stood before him, tired but excited. "Tell me everything," Joshua said. The spies reported all that had happened. They described the walls of Jericho. They told of the fear that gripped the city. They explained how Rahab had hidden them and helped them escape. Most importantly, they delivered their conclusion. "The Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands," they declared. "All the people are melting in fear because of us. They have heard what God has done for Israel. They know we are coming. Their courage is gone. The city is ripe to fall." Joshua smiled. This was excellent news, better than he had hoped. God was already fighting for them. The battle would be won in the hearts of the enemies before swords ever clashed. The next morning, Joshua gave the command, "Break camp." We marched to the Jordan. The entire nation of Israel packed up. Tents came down. Possessions were bundled. Children were gathered. Animals were herded together. The cloud of God's presence began to move, and they followed it. They traveled to the edge of the Jordan River and made camp there. The river was intimidating. This was the spring season. Winter snow was melting in the mountains. Rain had fallen heavily. The Jordan had overflowed its banks. It was much wider than normal. The current was swift and dangerous. Brown water rushed past, carrying debris. Crossing seemed impossible, especially with women, children, and animals. But Joshua was not worried. He had seen God part the Red Sea. He knew God could handle a river. The people camped by the Jordan for 3 days. They looked at the water. They wondered how they would cross. Some remembered the stories their parents had told them about the Red Sea. Would God do something similar again? On the 3rd day, Joshua called the officers together. "Go through the camp," he instructed. "Tell the people to consecrate themselves. Tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." The people spent the day preparing their hearts. They washed their clothes. They prayed. They examined their lives and confessed their sins. They made themselves ready to witness a miracle. The next morning, everyone assembled at the riverbank. Joshua stood before them. His voice carried clearly over the crowd. "Come and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you. He will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. The ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you." He paused to let that sink in. The Ark of the Covenant was the most sacred object in Israel. It was a wooden chest covered in gold. Inside were the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments. The Ark represented God's throne on earth. His presence rested on it. Where the Ark went, God went. Joshua continued, "Now choose 12 men from among you, one from each tribe. As soon as the priests who carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. The priests moved forward. 4 of them lifted the ark onto their shoulders, using the poles that ran through rings on its sides. They carried it carefully, reverently. Every step was measured. Every movement was deliberate. The people fell silent. Everyone watched the priests. Step by step, they approached the raging river. The water looked even more dangerous up close. It churned and foamed. Any normal person would be swept away in seconds. But the priests did not hesitate. They had their instructions from Joshua, and Joshua had his instructions from God. The lead priest reached the water's edge. He lifted his foot and stepped into the Jordan River. The instant his sandal touched the water, something miraculous happened. Far upstream, perhaps many miles away, the water stopped flowing. It began to pile up, higher and higher, like an invisible dam had suddenly appeared. Downstream, the water continued to flow away toward the Dead Sea. The riverbed in front of the priests began to appear as the water drained away. The priests walked forward. They moved into the middle of the riverbed. The ground beneath their feet was dry. Not muddy or damp, completely dry, as if the water had never been there. They reached the center point and stopped. They stood there holding the ark, waiting. Joshua turned to the people. "Cross over." It was like a dam breaking, but in reverse. The people surged forward. Families ran across the dry riverbed. Mothers carried babies. Fathers led children by the hand. Young men drove flocks and herds. Old people walked slowly but steadily. Everyone crossed. Thousands upon thousands of people streaming across where just minutes before had been a raging river. While the nation crossed, Joshua called forward 12 men. He had chosen them earlier, one from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. These men represented the whole nation. Joshua gave them an assignment. "Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you pick up a stone on your shoulder. There should be 1 stone for each of the tribes of Israel. This will serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you what these stones mean, tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." The 12 men waded back into the dry riverbed. Each one found a large stone as big as he could carry. They hoisted these stones onto their shoulders. Then they carried them up the far bank to where the nation would camp that night. There they would build a monument, 12 stones piled together as a reminder of this day. The crossing took time. The nation was enormous. 600,000 men, plus women and children. Perhaps 2 million people in total, plus all their animals, all their possessions, everything they owned. But eventually, every single person made it across. Not one was lost. Not one was left behind. When the last person stepped onto the far bank, Joshua gave another command. He signaled to the priests standing in the middle of the riverbed. They began to walk forward, carrying the ark toward the western bank. Their feet touched dry land on the Canaan side. The moment they stepped out of the riverbed, an incredible sound filled the air. The waters of the Jordan came rushing back. Upstream, the wall of water collapsed. A massive wave came roaring down the river. It filled the channel immediately. The Jordan returned to flood stage in an instant, overflowing its banks just as before. If anyone had tried to cross now, they would have been swept away and drowned. The people stared at the river in awe. They looked at each other with wide eyes. They had just walked through that? On dry ground? It seemed impossible, yet they had all experienced it. Their feet were dry. Their clothes were clean. No one was wet or muddy. God had brought them through without even getting damp. They made camp in a place called Gilgal, on the eastern border of Jericho. The 12 stones were set up there as Joshua had commanded. He spoke to the people as they arranged the stones. In the future, when your descendants ask their parents what these stones mean, tell them this. Tell them Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. The Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful. He did this so that you might always fear the Lord your God. It was the 10th day of the first month. They had entered the promised land. News of the Jordan crossing spread quickly. Every city in Canaan heard about it. Every king received the report. The Amorite kings west of the Jordan and the Canaanite kings along the Mediterranean coast learned that the Lord had dried up the Jordan River. When they heard this, their hearts melted in fear. Their courage failed them. How could they fight against a God who controlled rivers and seas? In Jericho, the fear was suffocating. The people had watched the Israelite camp appear on the other side of the Jordan. They had expected the river to protect them for a while. Maybe the Israelites would try to build boats. Maybe they would wait for the water level to drop. Either way, it would buy time. Instead, the entire nation had crossed in a single day, on dry ground. The same God who parted the Red Sea had now stopped the Jordan. The same power that destroyed Pharaoh's army was now focused on Canaan. Jericho stood directly in its path. The city went into lockdown. The gates were closed and barred. No one went out. No one came in. Guards manned the walls day and night. The city became a prison of fear. At Gilgal, the Israelites settled in. They had been eating manna for 40 years. Every morning, this bread from heaven appeared on the ground like dew. It tasted like wafers made with honey. It had sustained them perfectly through all their wandering. But they were in the promised land now. The land was rich and fertile. Crops grew here. They could eat the produce of the land. They celebrated Passover that month. This was the feast that commemorated their deliverance from Egypt. They sacrificed lambs at twilight, just as their ancestors had done the night before the Exodus. They ate unleavened bread and roasted lamb. They told their children the old stories. They remembered the blood on the doorposts that caused death to pass over them. They remembered walking out of Egypt as free people. The day after Passover, they ate some of the produce of Canaan for the first time. Unleavened bread made from grain they found in the land. Roasted grain from the local harvest. It tasted different from manna. It was real food from real fields. The next morning, something strange happened. Or rather, something did not happen. The manna did not appear. For 40 years without fail, manna had covered the ground each morning. But on this morning there was none. The people looked around in confusion at first. Then understanding dawned. They did not need manna anymore. God had brought them to a land flowing with milk and honey, a land that could feed them. The miraculous bread from heaven had served its purpose. Now they would eat the fruit of their labor in the land God had given them. One day Joshua walked near Jericho. He was surveying the city, studying its defenses, planning his strategy. He walked alone, deep in thought. The walls looked even more massive up close. The towers were tall and strong. The gates were reinforced. Taking this city by conventional means would be difficult, perhaps impossible. Suddenly, Joshua realized he was not alone. He looked up and saw a man standing in front of him. The man held a drawn sword in his hand. The sword gleamed in the sunlight. The man stood completely still, watching Joshua. Joshua's hand went to his own weapon. He approached carefully. He was not afraid, but he was cautious. "Are you for us or for our enemies?" he demanded. The man answered in a voice that seemed to resonate with authority. "Neither. But as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Joshua understood immediately. This was no ordinary man. This was either an angel or a manifestation of God himself. Either way, this was a holy encounter. Joshua fell on his face to the ground in reverence and worship. He stayed there, prostrate before this divine messenger. "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" Joshua asked humbly. "Take off your sandals," the commander replied, "for the place where you are standing is holy." Joshua immediately removed his sandals. His mind flashed back to the story of Moses at the burning bush. God had said the same thing to Moses. Moses had been standing on holy ground because God was present. Now Joshua stood on holy ground for the same reason. What happened next was a conversation between Joshua and the commander of the Lord's army. The details of that conversation are not fully recorded, but Joshua received his instructions. He learned how the battle for Jericho would be fought. The plan was unlike anything he had ever heard. It defied all military logic. It went against every principle of siege warfare. But Joshua had learned to trust God's wisdom over human wisdom. When Joshua returned to the camp at Gilgal, he called together all the fighting men of Israel. Behind the warriors stood the priests with their trumpets. In the center, 4 priests stood ready to carry the Ark of the Covenant. Joshua's face was serious but confident. He had met with the commander of the Lord's army. He had received the battle plan. Now he would share it with his people. "Listen carefully," Joshua said. "This is how we will take Jericho. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse. Every man will charge straight in." The men looked at each other. March around the city? Not attack it? Just walk in circles? For 6 days? This made no sense from a military perspective. But this army had learned something the previous generation had not. They had learned that God's ways work, even when they seem foolish to human thinking. Joshua had one more critical instruction. His voice became stern. "Do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. On that day when I give the command, then shout with all your might. Absolute silence, except for the trumpets." That was the order. The men nodded their understanding. If this was God's plan, they would follow it exactly. The next morning came quickly. The sun had barely risen when the army assembled. They formed up in a specific order. First came an armed guard of soldiers. These were fighting men, ready for battle, but they carried their weapons at rest. Behind them came 7 priests. Each priest carried a ram's horn trumpet called a shofar. These were not metal trumpets. They were made from the horns of rams, hollowed out and shaped to produce sound. Behind the 7 priests came 4 more priests, carrying the Ark of the Covenant on poles. Finally, behind the Ark came the rear guard, another group of armed soldiers. The procession began to move. The armed guard walked steadily. The 7 priests blew their trumpets. The sound was loud and mournful, a long, sustained blast that echoed off the hills. Behind them, the priests carried the ark. Behind them came the rear guard. But all the soldiers were silent. Not a word, not a whisper. Just the sound of thousands of feet marching in rhythm and the haunting blast of the ram's horn trumpets. They approached the walls of Jericho. On the walls, guards stood watching. They called down to the people inside. Soon the walls were lined with people. Soldiers, merchants, women, children. Everyone came to see what was happening. They stared down at this strange procession. The Israelites marched around the entire city. It took time. Jericho was not small. The walls enclosed several acres. The Israelites walked at a steady pace. The trumpets never stopped blowing. The soldiers never made a sound. They just marched, one complete circuit around the city. Then, when they had gone all the way around and returned to their starting point, they simply turned and walked back to their camp at Gilgal. That was it. No attack, no threats, no demands for surrender. They just marched around once and left. On the walls of Jericho, people looked at each other in confusion. What had just happened? What were the Israelites doing? Some people laughed nervously. "They think they can defeat us by walking?" one man said. Others were not laughing. "This is some kind of ritual," a woman whispered. "They are praying to their God, the God who parted the Red Sea, the God who stopped the Jordan River." Fear and confusion warred with each other in the hearts of Jericho's people. They did not understand what was happening. That made it worse. The second day dawned. Again, the Israelites assembled in the same formation. Armed guard, 7 priests with trumpets, the ark, rear guard. Again, they marched toward Jericho. Again, the trumpets blew their long, mournful notes. Again, the soldiers maintained absolute silence. They circled the city once. The people of Jericho watched from the walls. Some were getting used to it. Others felt their nerves fraying. Then the Israelites returned to their camp. The third day was the same. The fourth day repeated the pattern. By now, the routine was established. The Israelites would come at dawn. They would march around once. The trumpets would blow. The soldiers would remain silent. Then they would leave. But the psychological effect was devastating. The constant circling. The eerie silence broken only by trumpet blasts. The absolute discipline of the Israelite army. It wore on the people of Jericho. They could not sleep properly. They jumped at every sound. They argued with each other. Some wanted to attack the Israelites during their march. Others said that would be suicide. The disagreements created tension. Unity crumbled. Fear spread like a disease. The fifth day came and went, still the same pattern. Jericho's courage was evaporating. Warriors who had trained for years found their hands shaking. Mothers clutched their children and whispered prayers to their gods. But the gods of Canaan were silent. No help came. No relief arrived. On the 6th day, the march happened again. But something felt different. This time, when the Israelites marched back to their camp, there was a sense of anticipation in their step. The people of Jericho felt it too. Something was coming. Tomorrow would be different. Everyone knew it. Everyone felt it. That night, Joshua addressed his army. He gave them their final instructions. Tomorrow is the day. Tomorrow God will give you Jericho. The city and everything in it must be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute, and all who are with her in her house shall be spared. Because she hid the spies we sent. Keep away from the devoted things. Do not take any of them. If you do, you will bring destruction on the camp of Israel. All the silver and gold and all articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. The men listened intently. This was important. The first city conquered in the promised land belonged to God. Everything in it was holy, devoted to him. They could take nothing for themselves. The precious metals would go into God's treasury. Everything else would be destroyed. Only Rahab and her family would live. One man listening to Joshua's words was named Achan. He heard the command. He understood it. But in his heart, greed was already growing. He was already thinking about gold and silver. He was already planning to disobey. But his story would come later. For now, he stood silently with the others. The seventh day arrived. The dawn was clear and bright. The Israelite army assembled for the final time. The same formation. Armed guard, 7 priests with trumpets, the ark, rear guard. But today everyone could sense the difference. Today was the day of victory. Today the walls would fall. They began to march. The first circuit around the city. The trumpets blew their long, sustained notes. The soldiers remained silent. On the walls of Jericho, people watched with dread in their hearts. They knew this was not just another day. They could feel it. The first circuit was completed, but instead of returning to camp, the Israelites immediately began a second circuit. Around and around the city they marched. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Dust rose from thousands of marching feet. The trumpet blasts continued without pause. Still the soldiers said nothing. Second circuit done. They started the third. The tension was unbearable. On the walls, people gripped each other's hands. Children cried. Men fingered their weapons uselessly. What could swords and spears do against a God who controlled seas and rivers? Third circuit completed. Fourth circuit begun. The Israelites marched with steady determination. Their feet hit the ground in perfect rhythm. The priests blew their trumpets without tiring. The ark moved steadily around the city. This was not just a military exercise. This was worship. This was obedience. This was faith in action. Fourth circuit finished. Fifth circuit started. The sun was high now. The day was hot. But no one stopped. No one faltered. Around and around they went. In her house built into the wall, Rahab gathered her family close. Her father, mother, brothers, sisters, and everyone she loved crowded into her small home. The scarlet cord hung from her window, bright red against the wall. She had brought them all inside days ago and refused to let anyone leave. They watched through the window as the Israelites circled again and again. Fifth circuit completed. The sixth began. Everyone knew what came next. After the seventh circuit, something would happen. The people of Jericho were beyond fear now. They had moved into a kind of numb acceptance. Whatever was coming would come. They could not stop it. Their walls, which had protected them for generations, suddenly felt like a trap. They were locked inside, waiting for judgment. The sixth circuit was completed. The Israelites began their seventh and final march around Jericho. Every step brought them closer to the moment. Every blast of the trumpet seemed louder, more insistent. The priests carrying the ark moved with reverent solemnity. They knew they were carrying God's presence into battle. They knew he would fight for them. The seventh circuit neared completion. The Israelites returned to the point where they had started. The priests positioned themselves. The soldiers stood ready. The moment had arrived. Then the 7 priests blew one long, loud blast on their trumpets. The sound rose into the sky, sustained and powerful. It seemed to shake the very air. Every ear in Jericho heard it. Every heart trembled at the sound. Joshua raised his arm high. He opened his mouth and shouted one word at the top of his voice. Shout. The entire army of Israel erupted in a tremendous shout, thousands upon thousands of voices crying out together. It was not a war cry meant to intimidate enemies. It was a shout of faith, a declaration of victory, a proclamation that God was giving them this city. The sound was deafening. It rolled across the valley like thunder. It echoed off the hills and came back amplified. And the walls of Jericho fell down flat, not section by section, not crumbling gradually. The massive walls collapsed all at once with a roar like an earthquake. Stones tumbled. Towers crashed to the ground. The inner wall and outer wall both fell simultaneously. Dust billowed up in enormous clouds that blotted out the sun. The earth shook with the impact. The sound was indescribable. Hundreds of tons of stone and brick hitting the ground at the same moment. When the dust began to clear, the impossible had happened. The impregnable walls of Jericho lay flat on the ground. The mighty fortress was defenseless. The Israelites could walk straight into the city over the rubble. There was nothing to stop them now. But one small section of wall remained standing. The part where Rahab's house was built. Her home, perched on the wall, stood intact while everything around it had fallen. The scarlet cord still hung from her window, visible to all who looked. Joshua shouted another command. Forward, take the city. Every man charged straight ahead. The Israelite soldiers surged forward with a roar. They scrambled over the fallen stones and rubble. They poured into Jericho from every direction at once. The people of Jericho tried to resist, but their spirit was utterly broken. They had seen their walls fall at a shout. They knew they were fighting against God himself. Many threw down their weapons. Others tried to run. But there was nowhere to go. The battle was fierce but brief. The Israelites showed no mercy. This was devoted destruction, judgment pronounced by God on a wicked city. Every man fell to the sword. Every woman was killed. Even the livestock were put to death. This was complete and total destruction, as God had commanded. But in the midst of the chaos and destruction, Joshua called the 2 spies to him. They pushed through the crowds of soldiers to reach their commander. Joshua's face was stern, but his eyes were kind as he gave them their orders. You 2 know where to go, he said. You made an oath to that woman. Now go and fulfill it. Bring out Rahab and all who belong to her. Save them as you promised. The 2 spies ran through the ruined city. They knew exactly where to look. They searched until they spotted the scarlet cord hanging from a window. Rahab's house stood alone, a small island of stability in a sea of destruction. They climbed over rubble and made their way to her door. They pounded on it urgently. Rahab, it is us. The spies you saved. Come out. You are safe. The door opened slowly. Rahab stood there, her face pale but composed. Behind her crowded her entire family. Her elderly father leaned on a staff. Her mother clutched Rahab's arm. Brothers and sisters pressed close, some carrying small children. They all looked terrified but hopeful. Come quickly, one spy said gently. Follow us. We will take you somewhere safe. The spies led Rahab and her entire family out of the city. They guided them through the destruction, shielding them from the worst sights. They brought them to a place outside the camp of Israel where they would be protected until decisions could be made about their future. Rahab looked back once at the ruins of Jericho. Everything she had known was gone. Her city had fallen. Her old life was over, but she was alive. Her family was alive. They had been saved from destruction by the God of Israel. The same God she had declared was God in heaven above and on the earth below. Her faith had saved her. Her courage had preserved her family. Back in the city, the Israelite soldiers completed their grim work. When every living thing had been killed, they gathered all the precious items. Silver and gold were collected carefully. Bronze and iron articles were set aside. These would go into the treasury of the Lord as offerings. They belonged to God. Then the soldiers set fire to the city. Flames rose from hundreds of locations at once. The fire spread quickly, consuming everything. Houses burned. Wooden beams crackled and collapsed. The heat was intense. The smoke rose in a massive pillar that could be seen for many miles. Jericho burned through the day and into the night. When the flames finally died down, nothing remained but ashes and broken stones. The great city that had stood for thousands of years was gone. Only ruins remained to mark where it had been. Joshua stood in the midst of the destruction. Around him, his soldiers waited. The people of Israel had gathered to witness this moment. Joshua raised his voice so all could hear. He pronounced a solemn oath, a curse that would last for generations. Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest, he will set up its gates. It was a warning, a declaration. Jericho had been devoted to destruction by God himself. No one should attempt to rebuild what the Lord had torn down. The curse was real and would be remembered. Centuries later, a man named Hiel would try to rebuild Jericho. He would lose his firstborn son when he laid the foundations and his youngest son when he set up the gates, exactly as Joshua had pronounced. But that was far in the future. News of Jericho's fall spread like wildfire through Canaan. Messengers ran from city to city carrying the unbelievable report. The walls had fallen at a shout. The mighty fortress had been destroyed in a single day. The Israelites had conquered the gateway to Canaan. Terror seized the Canaanite cities. Kings called emergency councils. Armies were mustered. Alliances were formed. But underneath all the military preparations was a deep, paralyzing fear. If Jericho could fall so easily, what chance did any city have? How could anyone fight against a God who could bring down walls with a shout? In the camp of Israel, there was tremendous celebration. They had won their first battle in the Promised Land. They had seen God fight for them in the most spectacular way. No Israelite soldier had been killed. Not one had been wounded. They had simply marched and shouted, and God had done the rest. It was an overwhelming victory. It was a miracle. Joshua's reputation grew immensely after Jericho. His fame spread throughout the land. People spoke of him with respect and awe. He was the man who had succeeded Moses. He was the general who conquered Jericho without siege engines or battering rams. He was the leader whom the Lord was clearly with. As for Rahab, her story was far from over. She and her family were given a place to live near the Israelite camp. At first, they stayed outside the main camp because they were foreigners, but over time they were fully accepted. Rahab learned the ways of Israel. She learned about the God she had believed in. She became part of the community. Eventually, Rahab married an Israelite man from the tribe of Judah. His name was Salmon. Together they had a son named Boaz. Boaz would grow up to become a wealthy and respected man in Bethlehem. He would marry a foreign woman named Ruth, another outsider who chose to follow the God of Israel. Boaz and Ruth would have a son named Obed. Obed would have a son named Jesse, and Jesse would have a son named David. David would become the greatest king in Israel's history. He would unite the nation. He would conquer Jerusalem and make it his capital. He would establish a kingdom that would last for generations. And in his veins would flow the blood of Rahab, the prostitute from Jericho who had faith to believe in Israel's God. Centuries later, that same family line would continue. A young woman named Mary, a descendant of David, would give birth to a son in Bethlehem. His name would be Jesus. He would be called the Christ, the Messiah, the Savior of the world. And when people traced his genealogy back through the generations, they would find Rahab's name there. The Canaanite prostitute who had hung a scarlet cord in her window became an ancestor of Jesus Christ. Her story became a testament to God's amazing grace. It showed that God welcomes anyone who comes to him in faith, regardless of their past or their background. Rahab had been an outsider, a foreigner, a woman with a shameful occupation. But she believed in the God of Israel. She acted on that faith. She risked everything to help his people. And God saved her, blessed her, and made her part of the most important family line in human history. The fall of Jericho was more than just a military victory. It was a demonstration of God's power. It was proof that he keeps his promises. He had promised Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. 430 years later, he was fulfilling that promise. And that's where our story ends today. Thank you truly for spending these 4 hours with me. In a distracted world, you choose to be present for something meaningful. If this journey fed your soul, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and become part of our community. It's completely free. Also, your likes help others discover these timeless stories too. Blessings to you, and thank you for listening. I will see you again in another edition. Hello and welcome to another Bible story adventure. I'm thrilled to share these Bible stories with you today. Each one holds valuable lessons for our lives. Let's dive right in. Now we move to a man who did not want to obey God's instructions. His name was Jonah.